head and said, "Go around this clay figurine and see if you can find the mastermind behind this. If you can stop it, then go and stop it." Qing Shui and the other two were stunned. They could tell that Yun Zihai was planning to risk his life. The blood that Yun Zihai spat out surrounded the sword formed by the book pages and the brush. The book pages gradually turned red and it was filled with a demonic beauty. Yun Zihai took off the hairpin on his head, letting his long hair flutter in the wind. Blood dyed his clothes red, but he didn't know. "I use my noble chi as a sword that can destroy all evil. Noble chi, listen to my orders. With my body heaven and earth will submit." Waves of righteous energy surrounded Yun Zihai's body and his face began to turn from white to green. If he wanted to temporarily increase his realm, the price was his life. With the noble spirit as a pen, you can write the righteousness of heaven and earth. Using the noble spirit to make a sword, it could kill all kinds of evil. "I'll use this sword to take revenge on Brother Su, then I'll drink with Brother Su until we're drunk," Yun Zihai roared. However, just as he was about to forcefully increase his cultivation realm, a voice sounded. Chapter 160, All Fo Su, by your grandpa, die for your grandpa. Shifting stars, spin, 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 spin. This voice came from the head of the clay figurine. Yun Zihai was stunned. Qing Shui and Zhou Cheng, who were about to leave, were also stopped. Immediately after, they all revealed looks of surprise which then turned into joy. He didn't die? Su Bai was not dead. Qing Shui heaved a sigh of relief and said with a complicated expression, "One knew it. How could he die so easily? This is not him." She couldn't help but think of the demonic figure she had encountered in the spring rain pavilion, which had given her a strong shock. How could such a person die here? This person has to be a friend. I have to go back and make it clear to the sixth prince that we can't be enemies. Zhou Qing thought to himself, as long as they weren't enemies, everything was negotiable. Even if they couldn't work under the sixth prince, it was good to be friends. He seems to like the saber technique. I'll talk to Prince Six next time and give him a few more books. Zhou Qing thought to himself, a powerful friend could sometimes save a life. Zhou Qing knew this very well. "Brother Su, are you alright?" Yun Zihai shouted. When Su Bai's voice rang out, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders and he finally heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that he was not dead. If he died, how could he face Su Bai underground? Although he had paid, Yun Zihai still felt very uncomfortable. Of course, Su Bai couldn't hear what they were saying and he didn't give them any reply. In this dark forest, the silver moonlight shone down on the 3-meter-tall clay figurine. Sounds kept coming from the enemy's head. Come, 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 if you have the ability, kill me. Shifting stars, shifting, shifting, shifting. Yo, your strength has decreased a lot this time. Everyone was speechless. For some reason, what was originally a particularly serious scene had now become somewhat humorous. Has he always been like this? Zhou Qing asked in surprise. Should be? Yun Zihai pondered and said, Brother Su is really a wonderful person. No wonder he can get the high opinion of Wu Hua and Lu Su. He really has his own abilities. The three of them had their own ideas. Along with Su Bai's voice, the 3-meter-tall clay figurine also underwent a special change. One after another, huge bags bulged out of the mudman's body. Then these bags shattered. The mudman turned into mud and disappeared into the forest. Su Bai fell from the sky and was still cursing. An expert in everyone's eyes seemed to be cursing, making everyone feel a strange sense of disparity. Su Bai had suffered. When had he ever suffered this? Just now, when he was swallowed by the clay figurine, he felt that the world had turned dark. The powerful pressure caused the black light of the diamond heart fiend body to shatter. Moreover, it had happened in an instant, catching him off guard. If it weren't for the golden silk soft armor on his body, he would have been injured. He had been wearing the golden silk soft armor ever since he got it from the ferocious tiger camp. It was just that he had not been able to unleash its effects this time. It had, of course, even without the golden silk armor, he would only be slightly injured. Taking advantage of that gap, he hastily propped up the diamond heart demon body again and used stellar transposition to divert all his strength to the surroundings. Both were tier 4 skills corresponding to the 6th stage. The defense of the Vajra heart devil body was transferred by the stellar transposition, under the coordination of the two. Although the true essence energy in his kidneys was rapidly consumed, he was still able to kill the enemy. Reverse wound armor, are you afraid? Su Bai patted the soil off his body. In the blink of an eye, he saw Yun Zihai and the others. Why are you guys so miserable? This sentence was said out of emotion, not out of ridicule or mockery. Even when he was swallowed into the mudman's brain, he was not as miserable as Yun Zihai and the others. Brother Su, not everyone is as strong as you. Qing Shui and Zhou Cheng nodded in agreement. Then can you still move now? Su Bai asked again. Zhou Cheng and Qing Shui checked the room and nodded to show that it was still alright. Su Bai turned to Yun Zihai. Yun Zihai was the most miserable. If Su Bai had not spoken up in time, Yun Zihai would probably have used that kind of one-for-one method to perish together with the mudman. It's fine, I'll recover soon after taking the medicine. Yunzihai took out a bottle of pills from his bosom, poured out 2 pills and swallowed them. He seemed to have sensed Subai's gaze, so he explained as he ate, "It can replenish the energy consumed in the body and recover from injuries." As he spoke, he gave 1 pill each to Qing Shui and Zhou Qing. After Zhou Cheng and Qing Shui consumed it, they indeed had a significant boost in their health and their faces gradually turned rosy. Subai's eyes lit up. He suddenly covered his chest with his hand and pretended to be extremely weak. "Give me one too." From what Yunzihai said, this thing was a great tonic. In the battle just now, he had spent a lot of refined qi, especially in the position of his kidneys. Eating herbs could nourish both kidneys. He only thought that eating herbs related to the kidneys would replenish them faster, so he went to buy herbs to nourish the kidneys. Chapter 161, Subai Who Wants It All. 3. Now that he heard Yunzihai's words, he was tempted. "Brother Su, there's no need to pretend anymore with our relationship. Come take it," Yunzihai said helplessly. Subai took the porcelain bottle and poured one into his mouth. As soon as the pill entered his mouth, it turned into a warm current. Immediately after, he felt that in addition to replenishing his own true core strength, the true core strength of his kidneys was also slowly replenishing. Subai poured out another pill and put it into his mouth. With just 2 pills, he had filled up the previous consumption. Looking at the dozen or so pills in the porcelain bottle, Subai closed the lid and prepared to put them in his pocket. Qing Shui was very familiar with this action because Subai had treated her like this before. Yunzihai quickly pulled Subai's arm and said, "Brother Su, the academy gave this to the level 6 disciples. You can't take it away except for eating it now. If others find out, I will be punished." Subai sighed and returned the porcelain bottle. After all, he had already made it clear, so he couldn't take her away by force. He was a man of principle. After consuming the medicinal pill, everyone also recovered a lot. After Yunzihai identified the location, he led everyone towards their destination. Along the way, they advanced at full speed. Soon they saw a vast wilderness. In the wilderness there were 2 people standing. To be precise, it was a human and a fox demon. The man was wearing a mask, but it had already shattered, revealing his true appearance. The fox demon had a fox's head on her head and her entire body was covered in wounds. She held a blueprint tightly in her hand and prepared to escape. When Yunzihai saw the man's true appearance, he was stunned on the spot. "8th Prince." These 3 simple words made Subai frown. 8th Prince? Wasn't this guy already dead? It was even ended by Yunzihai himself. How did it come back to life? Yunzihai did not reply, so Qing Shui explained in a low voice, "It's very likely that it's a fox demon in disguise. Fox demons are best at disguise and confusion. Even some experts would find it difficult to tell." After hearing Qing Shui's explanation, Subai thought of many things. So the person behind the scenes was actually the 8th Prince. It seemed that the tomb of the emperor's brother was more complicated than he had imagined. Everyone thought to themselves. In the middle of the scene, the 8th Prince and the 1,000-faced fox were staring at each other. Because they were too focused, they did not notice that a group of people was already approaching from afar. "I knew it. You're here for the map. Give me the map and I'll spare your life." The 8th Prince extended his hand. Even though his mask was broken, he still had that domineering aura. Although his clothes were slightly messy compared to the 1,000-faced fox, one was in the sky and the other was on the ground. "You never believed us?" The 1,000-faced fox gripped the map in her hand tightly and her face revealed a painful expression. There was a huge bloody hole in her chest and blood was flowing out. If it wasn't for her demonic constitution, she would probably be long gone by now. "If I succeed in this matter, why would I leave a stain of cooperating with the evil path?" The 8th Prince sneered. "I just didn't expect your hallucination technique to be so powerful. Give me the thing and I'll spare your life." Subai and the others didn't know what had happened, but from their conversation it was obvious that the 8th Prince's item had been snatched by the 1,000-faced fox. The reason was that the 8th Prince wanted to kill the 1,000-faced fox. "If you dare to take another step closer, I will destroy it." The 1,000-faced fox raised the map in his hand and shouted. At this moment, Subai and the others also approached. As they were too close, the 8th Prince and the 1,000-faced fox also noticed the situation. At this moment, Subai noticed that there was a tunnel under the 8th Prince's feet that led underground. Subai rolled his eyes and suddenly shouted, "The map can save your life. If you run to us, you can save your life." The 1,000-faced fox was not an idiot. Without saying anything, it turned around and ran towards Subai. The 8th Prince looked at Subai and the others, then at the 1,000-faced fox. He didn't catch up but made a move. He turned around and strode into the passageway below, quickly disappearing from everyone's sight. When Subai saw this scene, he raised his eyebrows slightly. Very decisive. This guy was much more decisive than he had imagined. When he saw that there were more people in front of him and that they were all threats, he turned around and ran away. He didn't even want the map. It seemed that those who could participate in the struggle of the royal family were not simple-minded. Thinking of this, he saw that the 1,000-faced fox had already arrived. "I have a map. Please spare my life." The 1,000-faced fox raised the map and shouted, however she was also careful. She stopped not far away from Subai and did not approach him. Just now she was relieved when the 8th prince walked into the tunnel without hesitation. However, now that she was facing these people she was relieved again. Entering a wolf's den after entering a tiger's den was a fitting description of his current situation. A drop of sweat dripped down from the thousand-faced fox. It looked very nervous. Subai and the others surrounded her and did not let her escape, especially Subai, who stared at the map in her hand and smacked his lips. The vitality of this demon was indeed tenacious. He was actually still alive after suffering such a serious injury in his chest. However, now was not the time to think about this. This map was very important. Chapter 162. All of them want thinking of this. Subai stretched out his hand and said, "Alright, we are all people who keep our word. Hand over the map and you can leave." Thousand-faced fox, what? You still don't believe me? Subai pretended to be angry. Although the thousand-faced fox did not speak, the expression on its face was very obvious. Under such circumstances, how could he believe in this? Not to mention believing it, everyone had to use 800 tricks. Sigh. Subai pulled out Ghost Headblade. What are you doing? The thousand-faced fox was shocked. She felt a murderous intent pervading the air and locking onto her. Since you don't believe me, I can only kill you reluctantly. Subai smiled. Although she was smiling, she did not hide her killing intent. The thousand-faced fox could feel that the other party really wanted to kill her. There's leeway. As long as you let me go to a safe place, I'll leave the map there and you can come back to retrieve it, the thousand-faced fox hurriedly said. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard everyone laughing in unison as if they were mocking him. If you don't believe us, how can we believe you? This logic was completely reasonable. If you wait until you're safe and escape with the map, won't you lose both your life and money? Brother Su, hurry up and kill her. We still have to go to the tunnel behind us. The clouds came from the sea. It had been a while since the 8th prince entered the tunnel. Now that he had delayed for a while, things would change if he delayed. Yun Zihai did not want to delay. Wait everyone, I have another idea. I can take the map and go down with you. I can also show you the way and tell you what the 8th prince wants to do, the thousand-faced fox quickly said. At this moment she could see that the other party did not want the map at all. They were completely different from the 8th prince. What the other party wanted more was her life. After getting rid of her, they would enter the tomb below. How could this be? In order to survive, the thousand-faced fox had tried all means and finally said these words. That's a good idea, but how can you guarantee that you won't suddenly run away or trigger the mechanism inside when you go down? Subai stroked his chin and said. The thousand-faced fox raised its right hand and made an oath. L can guarantee that I will never do that, trust me. Yun Zihai frowned. Based on his understanding of Subai was not a person who would dawdle at any time. Judging from the current situation, it was obvious that the fox demon had nothing to fear because of this map. The promise that the fox demoness had mentioned just now was nonsense to anyone, because how much was the word guarantee worth? In this day and age, the most worthless thing was the so-called guarantee. Yun Zihai could see this, so how could Subai not? Brother Su, you have an idea. Yun Zihai thought to himself. Qing Shui and Zhou Qing didn't say anything. They just watched Subai's performance quietly. At this moment did not say anything. He just sized up the thousand-faced fox with a hint of teasing in his eyes. The thousand-faced fox was slightly stunned. She didn't understand what Subai was thinking, especially that gaze. She felt like she was going to die. Can it work or not? The thousand-faced fox asked tentatively. There's a saying that I don't know if you've heard of before. Subai smiled. The thousand-faced fox was stunned and subconsciously said, what words? Subai stretched out his right hand and clenched his fingers into a fist. I want them all. After saying this, the thousand-faced fox suddenly felt her blood run out of control. Then she felt dizzy. In just an instant the thousand-faced fox became alert. You poisoned me. This kind of feeling happened for no reason. With her realm this was impossible, however it happened. The result was obvious. Thinking of this, the thousand-faced fox quickly turned its attention to the map in its hand, wanting to tear it apart. However, it was already too late. Subai was using the 4 steps technique and he was able to arrive in front of the thousand-faced fox in just a few steps. Then he extended his right hand, which was wrapped in the dark light of the diamond heart fiend body, and grabbed the thousand-faced fox's wrist. You've been in the dark. The thousand-faced fox was furious and raised its hand to hit Subai's back. However, she was poisoned at the moment and her blood was not flowing smoothly. Coupled with the effects of the poison, her reaction was also slow. Even a level 6 expert would only have one outcome if Subai got close to him. Die. Subai's empty left hand appeared from his waist. He raised the ghost head blade and cut off the thousand-faced fox's head. The thousand-faced fox was not good at fighting, let alone close combat. At this moment, with a slash, it had already lost its life. The map in his left hand was not destroyed and was held tightly in his hand, but it was too late to destroy it now. Subai sheathed his saber and snatched the map from the thousand-faced fox's hand. he smiled and said, "El told you I want them all." Unfortunately, the thousand-faced fox was already dead and could no longer hear Subai's words. When Yunzihai and the others saw this scene, they also knew how Subai did it. They searched everywhere on their bodies as if they were afraid of being poisoned. "Don't be afraid, the wind won't blow in your direction," Subai said. Chapter 163, Subai Who Wants It All, 5. As he spoke, he flipped open the map in his hand and extended his hand towards Yunzihai. "Brother Yun, give me the missing one." Yunzihai reached into his pocket and took out a small piece of paper the size of a thumb. He handed it to Subai, placed the paper in a corner and looked around. He found that it fit perfectly. Everyone gathered around and examined the map from head to toe, their eyes shining brighter and brighter. This was obviously a map of the mausoleum. With this map their safety would increase exponentially. "Hurry up." The clouds came from the sea. It had been some time since the 8th prince had entered the passageway below. They had to hurry or else they would lose everything. "I'm thinking about how this guy will move forward without the map. Even if he remembers this map, the missing one is very important." Subai pointed at the broken corner. That position was the end of the map. If this part was missing, it would be like taking off all your clothes and pants only to find that the other party was the same as you. "I should have asked the thousand-faced fox just now," Zhou Qing said. "If you can think of it, can Subai not think of it?" The thousand-faced fox was a demon, and it was obvious that she was experienced. If she stayed for a while longer, she would have new changes. Qing Shui choked. Even now Qing Shui was still very unhappy. After all, Zhou Qing was the 6th prince's man. Even if it was not Zhou Qing's idea to send people to assassinate him, there was a saying that said, "Love the house and hate the crow." Qing Shui is right. Subai praised. He did have this idea. At this critical moment the game could not have any flaws. Before he made his move, he thought about cutting off the thousand-faced fox's limbs. However, after thinking about it, he decided against it. Even if there was a possibility of a 100% or 100%, it could not happen. The thousand-faced fox was a 6th grade. Compared to the people he had dealt with before, it was a level higher. It was better to be careful. "Let's go in first. After we go in, we'll split mountains and rocks," Subai said. Everyone nodded. This was the only way now. Thinking of this, everyone did not stay any longer and came to the passageway that led to the underground. The 8th prince must have opened it earlier. Because the 8th prince was standing in a different position, he blocked everyone's line of sight, so they really didn't notice it at first. The tunnel led underground and was extremely dark. This tunnel was actually cut into many stairs, which seemed quite considerate. Looking at the incomparably dark passageway in front of them, Subai and the others walked in directly. On the other side, the 8th prince, who had already run far away, had an ashen expression. He walked in the dark corridor, moving his feet from time to time to avoid dangerous and terrifying traps. He didn't remember the entire map, only half of it. The map was too complicated. He was not a scholar and he had not obtained it for long. So far he had only memorized half of it. Otherwise he would not have been so anxious when the thousand-faced fox had snatched it away. There was nothing he could do about it. In fact, when he first obtained the map, he could have found some time to memorize the map before taking action. However, some things could not be solved just by memorizing them steadily. Time did not wait for him. Tonight was a good day. Other than the full moon hanging in the sky, there were all kinds of favorable conditions. When combined, it was hard to come by even once in 10 years. If he delayed and wasted this opportunity, he would have to wait for 10 years, but could he afford to wait? When he thought of the book he had accidentally obtained in the royal library, the 8th prince felt more anxious than passionate. He couldn't afford to wait. 10 years could change many things. The 8th prince pondered as he walked along the passage according to his memories. As he walked, he stopped halfway. He had already completed all the routes he had memorized and was safe and sound, but now he was faced with a new problem. He could not remember the remaining half of the journey. As a member of the royal family, the 8th prince knew better than anyone how dangerous the royal tomb was. "Say, I still have to use that move in the end. I hope I can hold on until then," the 8th prince sighed. At that time, when he saw Subai and the others rushing over, he had already thought of running away. He didn't even consider it. The reason was simple. Other than not wanting to risk his life, the most important thing was that he had a second plan. However, this second plan was very hurtful to him. The 8th prince raised his hand and gently cut his other wrist. A wound appeared and blood flowed down his palm to the ground. "8th brother descendant of the great Chu royal family is here." The 8th prince roared and threw his palm in all directions. Blood splattered all over the passage and he took a step forward without hesitation. The surroundings were quiet as usual and there were no abnormalities. As expected, this is the backup plan left behind by father. With the blood of the royal family, it can stop the mechanism. The 8th prince took out a pill from his pocket and swallowed it, but he did not swallow it. The effects of the medicine were slowly taking effect and his ability to produce blood was gradually increasing. The 8th prince looked at the darkness in front of him. Chapter 164, Chapter 95. Great You Will It Be Destroyed? The eighth prince knew very well that the key to this plan was the map. However, the map had already been snatched away by the thousand-faced fox, and Subai and the others had come over, causing him to lose the opportunity to snatch the map back. After a while, the originally well-thought-out plan had turned into a piece of junk work due to various reasons, rotten, really rotten, and all of this was because of Subai. If it weren't for Subai, he would have killed Yun Zihai long ago. If it weren't for Subai, even if Yun Zihai arrived here first, he might not have been able to pass the ghost sculptor's test. If it weren't for Subai, he would have succeeded long ago. Why did he have to activate the second plan? The eighth prince had always thought that he was an extremely cautious person, so he had always prepared a second plan, but he really didn't want to activate the second plan. The eighth prince could only smile bitterly as he felt the blood flowing out of his body and the pill in his mouth. The pill was slowly melting. He could clearly feel that the speed at which it melted was unknown if it could last until the end. Even a level 6 expert would die from excessive blood loss. The wound was slowly healing. To prevent it from completely healing, the eighth prince would rub it from time to time to make the wound deepen. As he splattered blood, he advanced quickly. The eighth prince was very fast. Fortunately, with the blood of the royal family, the surrounding mechanisms were not triggered. However, he knew very well that the wall could absorb blood very quickly. This was a trap set up by the emperor. If someone followed from behind with the speed at which the wall absorbed blood, the person behind would soon face the trap again. The eighth prince didn't know if Subai and the others had the map, but he thought that even if they had the map, the traps behind them would at least be able to stop them for a moment. After all, he was walking without fear, while the other party needed to look at the map while walking. Thinking of this, the eighth prince walked faster. There was still an airtight passage ahead. The surroundings looked ordinary, but the eighth prince knew that there were countless dangers inside. The tunnel was dark. The eighth prince walked as he spilled blood. He was bleeding a lot. As they sped along, the passage ahead became narrower and narrower. The narrower the passage, the more difficult it would be to use it if an accident happened. Obviously, the designer of this passage knew this well. In the end, only one person could pass through. After the eighth prince walked for a while, something strange suddenly appeared in front of him. The narrow passage gradually widened. In the end, the eighth prince stopped in front of a door. This door was extremely wide, with about 10 meters on both sides. Even the space was unbelievably large. According to the book, this door is the final passage. The eighth prince was ecstatic. If I can enter, I'll be able to obtain Imperial Uncle's treasure. At that time, I won't be stuck at the 6th rank. Thinking of this, the eighth prince became more and more excited. What he wanted was the treasure left behind by King Shengyu after his death. In fact, the truly valuable ones were all kept in the royal family's treasury by his father. The ones left in the tomb were things that his father did not need. Of course, even if it was something that the royal family did not need, it was enough to cause a bloody storm in the martial arts world. The eighth prince's ambition was not here. What he needed was not these treasures. This was just a side effect. What he needed was what was recorded in the book. By chance, the eighth prince obtained a book from the royal library. In the royal library, most of what they could see was what only they could see. The emperor was extremely strict with them. This book was originally regarded as the autobiography of King Shengyu and was placed in the corner of the lowest level. There was a thick layer of dust on it. When the eighth prince was in the royal treasury, he had accidentally discovered it. At that time, he had already stopped at rank 6 for a long time. The cultivation method given by the emperor was only considered to be of the middle level among the 6th stage. He did not dare to cultivate anything else, so the punishment would be extremely terrifying if he was discovered. Therefore, in a depressed mood, he wandered around the royal treasury and happened to wander to a corner. He saw this book covered in a layer of dust. At that time, he was in a bad mood and he was curious about King Shengyu, so he opened the book. After that, he discovered the secret of the book. The book described the past of King Shengyu, and the author of this book was also King Shengyu. Unknowingly, the eighth prince was fascinated by the movie, a book that wrote down Shengyu King's magnificent life. This prince had followed the emperor to war and he had made great contributions. His entire life was condensed in this book, and it was amazing. Just as the eighth prince was completely engrossed in the book, he didn't expect to see the secret behind it. King Shengyu's cultivation method was in the power of the army, especially when he was in the army. Even if all the soldiers were ordinary people under King Shengyu's army, they could still turn the tide. This was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that King Shengyu was dead and buried. However, in the end, he had never seen the so-called tiger tally. What was a tiger tally? The tiger tally was a military talisman used by the emperor to mobilize troops. It was made of bronze or gold and was in the shape of a tiger. It was split into two halves. The left half was given to the general and the right half was kept by the emperor. As long as the two tiger talismans were used at the same time, the talisman's holder would have the right to mobilize troops. However, in Great Chu, what King Shengyu held was the complete tiger tally because the emperor had enough trust in him. It was also because at that time King Shangyu took the initiative to withdraw from the competition for the throne. Chapter 165, Chapter 95 Great You Will It Be Destroyed? _2 The method of military formations would be integrated into the things that one would often control and closely related to when they were alive. This also meant that the tiger tally might have been integrated into King Shangyu's military formation. As for how the 8th prince knew, it was because of the content that the 8th prince was in charge of. The 8th prince was in charge of the access to the royal treasury. Although he was in control of the world, he did not dare to move recklessly. When King Shengyu died, the items that entered the royal treasury were related to King Shengyu, but there was no tiger tally. There were only two possibilities. One was that the emperor kept it for himself. After all, the importance of the tiger tally was more valuable than most of the things in the royal treasury. The second was to be buried with King Shengyu. According to what was written in the book, the 8th prince believed that the second possibility was extremely likely. In this book, King Shengyu said a sentence: "The emperor only trusted one person in his life, and that was King Shengyu." Based on this analysis, the 8th prince believed that the tiger tally might have become a burial item. The reason was simple. First of all, the emperor himself did not know the way of military formations. Even if he had the tiger tally, he would not be able to use it. Secondly, the emperor only trusted Shengyu King. How could he give such an important thing to a second person? Without the army, King Yu Sheng's strength was very weak. And why did King Shengyu want to go to Shang County alone again? In this autobiography, the most important reason was recorded in detail, and it was at the end. On it was written that he was going to Shangxian County alone with the tiger tally. That was all. Other than that, there was no other news. There was only this paragraph. The most important thing to the 8th prince was also in this passage: tiger tally. When Shengyu King left, he had brought the tiger tally with him, but until now he had not seen any news of the tiger tally. The royal treasury that he was in charge of did not have it. Ever since he obtained this book, he had been investigating in secret. In the end, he really found out something. The people who buried King Shengyu and built his mausoleum were all secretly executed by the emperor, but one of them was still alive. He had spent a lot of effort to escape from the siege back then. Ever since he escaped, he did not dare to have any strange thoughts. He had been hiding his identity until he was discovered by the 8th prince. To be more precise, it wasn't the 8th prince who discovered it, but the thousand-faced fox. After the thousand-faced fox brought this person to the 8th prince, they had a long conversation. In the end, the 8th prince had made up his mind to do it. According to that person, the map of the imperial tombs had always been hidden in the royal treasury. The 8th prince immediately worked with the thousand-faced fox and used his authority to secretly steal the map. However, he was still discovered in the end. In the end, he used fake death to escape. Then there was what happened after that. Until now, the tiger tally was too important. If he had the tiger tally, he would have the capital to go against the emperor. The 8th prince had long been dissatisfied when he thought of the harsh restrictions the emperor had placed on them, especially when he thought of how they could not even break through to the 6th stage. In addition to the huge benefits of the tiger tally, the 8th prince couldn't get rid of it at all. He decided to take the risk. Looking at the huge door in front of him, the 8th prince was excited. He slowly raised his hand and pressed it on the door. The large hand was still stained with blood. When the palm touched the door, the entire door rumbled and then slowly opened a crack. The gap gradually widened. In the blink of an eye, the door automatically opened, revealing the space inside. It was pitch black inside, so he couldn't see clearly. The 8th prince thought that he couldn't delay any longer. The medicine in his mouth was about to disappear. He raised his feet and walked in. When he stepped inside, the darkness in front of him gradually disappeared. The darkness wasn't the only thing that disappeared. The door behind him slammed shut. The moment the door closed, the darkness inside appeared and became bright. Torches were embedded in the walls, lighting up the surroundings. As the torch lit up, the 8th prince saw the surrounding scene. His hair stood on end and his pupils constricted as if he had seen a terrifying monster. The originally dark space became bright. Indiana, the blink of an eye, he saw terracotta soldiers one after another. The square-shaped camp with each terracotta soldier less than half a meter apart filled the entire room. The spacious and huge room contained more than 10,000 terracotta soldiers, making it look unusually solemn. However, other than the solemnity, the 8th prince felt an extremely cold and sinister aura that made his heart tremble. He felt that the terracotta soldiers seemed to have come alive. They were staring at him with an incomparably cold gaze, making him feel cold all over and unable to take a step forward. This feeling was sudden and without any warning. It didn't even give him any time to react. His line of sight followed the group of terracotta soldiers and reached the end in the blink of an eye. At the end of the group of terracotta soldiers, there was a pitch-black stone coffin floating in the air. The stone coffin was bound by layers of iron chains. The ends of the iron chains were nailed to the wall. It was precisely because of the nails that it floated in the air. Something's wrong, something's definitely wrong. The 8th prince could no longer control himself. He stretched out his trembling hand and pointed at the terracotta soldiers in front of him, letting out a terrified voice. How could there be so many terracotta soldiers here? The most important thing was the stone coffin, which was protected by the terracotta soldiers. Looking at the posture of these terracotta soldiers, it was as if they were guarding their king. Chapter 166, Chapter 95. Great, you will it be destroyed? _3. As the terrified voice rang out, the 8th prince suddenly stopped moving. He stood there like a wooden statue and slowly retracted his raised hand. In just a moment a grayish-white mark appeared on the 8th prince's body. After the traces appeared as time passed, the color continued to increase. In the blink of an eye it turned from grayish-white to the yellow color of soil. The earthen yellow color was getting thicker and thicker. It gradually spread from the 8th prince's skin and filled his entire body. Living terracotta soldiers. I know. I emo. The 8th prince shouted again, but his words stopped in the next moment because the earthen yellow soil had filled up his entire body. Gradually the 8th prince lost all signs of life. He maintained his original appearance and slowly walked into the terracotta formation. With a light sound the torches around the wall were extinguished and everything returned to normal. However, this only restored the darkness. Other changes occurred in the darkness. A series of nightmarish murmurs echoed throughout the night. The ground began to shake at a strange frequency. The shaking was getting stronger and stronger, and it was spreading throughout the entire mausoleum. Something strange happened on the 8th prince's side. In the passage far away from the 8th prince, Subai and the others were holding a map and slowly advancing. In Zhou Qing's words, this matter could not be rushed because there would definitely be unimaginable traps in a tomb like this. If he was anxious, it would be easy for something big to happen. They compared their positions on the map. Although they were not fast, they were very safe. From the approximate location on the map one could see a relatively perfect outline. Judging from the outline, the mausoleum should be sealed off and could only be entered and exited in one direction. The 8th prince could not escape. If he wanted to escape, he could only escape in their direction. Therefore Subai and the others were on guard as they walked in case the 8th prince returned. However, he didn't expect the journey to be so safe. It wasn't until he was halfway there that Subai noticed something different. Look at the wall. On the wall there were dark red bloodstains that had long dried up. 8th prince is injured? Yun Zihai was slightly stunned. Maybe, no one can say for sure. But if we don't find his body, none of us can let our guard down. Whether he was injured or had other motives, it was still unknown at the moment. If he wanted to know the real answer, he had to keep going. They no longer hesitated and Zhou Qing became even more focused. He held the map and walked faster. As they walked, everyone felt that it was getting stranger. The reason was simple. The blood on the wall was scattered too evenly, almost without stopping along the way. The amount of bleeding was huge. Who had so much blood to use? He had already done it, yet he still survived? It's a blood pill, a pill from the royal family's treasury, Qing Shui suddenly said. He himself was the 9th princess' personal servant girl, and seeing the bizarre scene in front of him, he naturally thought of the kind of pill. Looks like our 8th prince isn't injured but used this method to avoid the trap. Subai rubbed his chin and came to a conclusion after recalling everything he had seen. Hurry up. Yun Zihai urged Zhou Qing. Zhou Qing turned around and helplessly said, the speed is already the fastest. Dense beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. It was obvious that this degree of concentration was very harmful to his body. After all, he was right in front of them. If they made a wrong move, danger would come and drown them completely. Subai was about to speak. However, he did not expect that a strange change would occur in the next moment. The ground began to shake at a certain frequency, and the magnitude of the shaking was getting stronger and stronger. He could barely stand still. Not good. Yun Zihai was on guard. However, at this moment the vibration began to gradually decrease. In the blink of an eye it disappeared completely. Everything returned to normal as if nothing had happened. However, the feeling just now was too obvious and could not fool everyone's eyes. What happened just now? Qing Shui asked doubtfully. The others shook their heads in unison, indicating that they were not sure. This place was getting weirder and weirder. Everyone felt that they could not delay any longer, so they let Zhou Qing continue leading the way into the passageway. The passage became narrower and narrower. After they walked for a distance, they saw a huge door in front of them. There was also an exquisite embossed on the door. Just looking at it made one feel happy, and it matched the dark environment very well. Subai came closer. In the darkness he saw a bloody handprint on the door. Can you drive it? Subai turned around and asked. From the moment he saw the door, Zhou Qing did not speak. It was as if he had seen something strange. He lowered his head and pondered. After Subai asked, he finally reacted and nodded repeatedly. The map didn't say that there was danger up there, so it should be possible to open it. Subai frowned. What were you thinking about? Following Subai's voice, the others also looked over. Zhou Qing smiled bitterly. When I walked through this passage just now, I felt like I'd seen it before, especially when the passage turned from wide to narrow and then from narrow to wide again. I think I've seen it in a book in my family, but I don't major in this aspect, so my memory isn't very clear and I can't remember. Chapter 167, Chapter 95 Great You Will It Be Destroyed? _4 Subai pondered for a moment. He couldn't tell, but it felt familiar. Zhou Qing was basically spouting nonsense. Everyone, it's best to be prepared. Zhou Qing seemed to realize that he had said something useless, so he picked up the map in his hand and went to the door. He raised his head to look at the bloody handprint on the door and then looked down at the map in his hand. After about half an incense stick of time, he finally turned his head to look at Subai and the others. The map didn't say anything about how to open it. Why do I feel that something is wrong here? This place was very narrow at first, but now it has become extremely wide. I feel that the memories in my mind are getting clearer and clearer. Zhou Qing hit his head hard as if he wanted to retrieve the memories that he had forgotten. At this point no one urged him. They waited patiently. About half an incense's time passed. Zhou Qing had been observing the door and the embossed on it. His gaze showed no signs of moving away. At this moment he finally let go of his hand and turned to look at Subai and the others. The shock in his eyes that could never be hidden had long been seen through by Subai and the others. Let's go. It's a technique to reverse life and death. Zhou Qing only said this one word and prepared to return along the original path without any signs of stopping. What's going on? Explain yourself first. Subai frowned and felt that things were not that simple. There must be a big guy hidden inside. This is definitely not something we can deal with. Remember when we came in, it first narrowed from wide to narrow and then from narrow to wide? Do they look like two opposing funnels? Zhou Qing gestured with his hand and a bitter smile appeared on his face. He described the terrain they had taken before. Subai thought about it carefully for a moment. It really was like that. The place they had gone to was indeed distributed according to this terrain. But the problem was, what did the so-called reversal of life and death mean? It wasn't just Subai. Junzihai and Qingshui also didn't understand this. They all looked over, waiting for Zhou Qing to give them an answer. Zhou Qing organized his words. He knew that he had to make things clear at this time, or else he would be the one to take the blame. The so-called method of reversing life and death is to use a special formation to resurrect someone from the dead. To put it simply, it's not resurrecting from the dead because that person is not completely dead, he's buried underground, and uses the aura of death to bury the aura of life so that it won't completely dissipate. And the funnel-shaped terrain that we saw earlier, part of it faces the outside. It's pouring life energy into it from the outside. After shrinking and compressing it, it will expand out from another funnel, replacing death energy with life energy. When I say life energy replacing death energy, it's just a name. The so-called life energy refers to all those who have the aura of a living person. We are that person, and so is the eighth prince. At this point Zhou Qing had roughly explained everything. He kept quiet and waited for Subai to give his next instructions. After all, Subai was the one who could make the decisions here. Whether to fight or retreat, he had to give an explanation. King Shengyu isn't completely dead yet. He wants to revive? Combined with what Zhou Qing had just said, the terrain here also matched what Zhou Qing had said. Coupled with the identity of the person buried here, Subai quickly guessed this. As soon as this bold idea came out, everyone present was stunned on the spot and could not come back to their senses for a long time. There was no one here who was stupid. Everyone was smart and many things were clear. When Subai said the answer, they immediately thought of the possibility. To be precise, the possibility was very high. Your Highness, he didn't die? Qing Shui's red lips were wide open and she could stuff a lot of things into them. If that was really the case, they really couldn't stay here. Who was King Shengyu? If he was still alive, he could turn the entire Great Chu upside down with a stomp of his foot. Qing Shui was a servant girl of the royal family, so she naturally knew more about the inside story than some layman, especially about the great achievements of King Shengyu. He was a figure that made the entire enemy country tremble. I think we should go back first. After that I want to report to His Majesty and see how he handles it. Yun Zihai said solemnly. Although he had his own mission, the predicament he was facing now had already exceeded the limits of what he could handle. It was something he could not handle at all. Moreover, he was not a pedantic scholar. After encountering something, flexibility was the most important. Subai didn't mind. Anyway, he was just a helper this time. Since Yun Zihai didn't want to participate, he couldn't wait to turn around and leave. After all, he wouldn't be short of rewards after turning around and leaving. Everyone knew the situation and made up their minds to leave. It seemed very slow, but in fact it was only a moment. Without any hesitation they turned around and prepared to leave. However, in the next moment a strange situation occurred in the dark tunnel. Boom. A series of rumbling sounds sounded behind him. When Subai turned around and saw the situation behind him, he frowned. Chapter 168, Chapter 95 Great You Will It Be Destroyed? _5 behind them. The originally dark passage collapsed, blocking their escape route. Now they only had this door in front of them. When the collapsed tunnel appeared behind him, the door in front of him also let out a series of tooth-numbing sounds and was opening at an extremely slow speed. Subai was speechless. Did this mean that he had to go in? In the current situation, this was indeed the case. There was no path behind him, but it was darkness when he was alive. Zhou Qing's face was pale as he muttered to himself, reversing the Tao of life and death, yin yang severing life and death. It's over, he's alive. Other than trembling, there was also boundless fear in his words. They were about to face the King Shengyu, who had once made the entire Great Yu state silent out of fear in the Great Shu state. Yun Zihai thought for a moment and silently took a step forward, walking in front of everyone. With a slight sound, the dark space behind the door was illuminated. There were torches on the walls. When all the light sources gathered together, the entire space was as bright as day. The countless terracotta soldiers in the stone coffin floating at the very back made the space deathly and filled with endless killing intent. Subai frowned, feeling that something was wrong. This killing intent was very strong. If it was an ordinary person here, they would be able to feel it clearly. However, Subai and the others were not ordinary people. They had experienced all kinds of bloody scenes. In this aspect, they could sense that there was something unusual about the murderous intent. This killing intent was natural and was produced by each terracotta soldier. Moreover, it was uncontrollable and was not targeted at them. In other words, when they entered this incomparably huge space, there was no danger for the time being. What's that? At this moment, Qing Shui suddenly raised her fair right hand and pointed at a certain spot. Everyone heard the voice and looked in the direction of the voice. They found that the voice was pointing at the huge stone coffin. On the stone coffin there was a faint shadow that was constantly shaking. The moment the phantom appeared, an extremely overbearing aura continuously pervaded the air, suppressing the killing intent in the entire space by 30%, domineering and domineering. It was filled with the pressure of a superior, and there was also a sense of iron and blood. It was like a mountain peak that reached into the clouds. Standing in front of it, whether it was an incomparably huge elephant or a tiny ant, they all felt a terrifying sense of oppression. Crack. As the shadow appeared, cracks suddenly appeared on one of the terracotta soldiers on the ground. Immediately after, the soil on it shattered and fell to the ground, revealing its true appearance. Inside the terracotta soldier, a man in black stood expressionlessly. His hands were hanging down and his eyes were closed. His face was calm as if he was asleep. Eighth Prince. Yun Zihai's pupils constricted. He could no longer feel the life force on the Eighth Prince. It was obvious that he was completely dead, but for some reason he was still standing on the ground. When Yun Zihai shouted this sentence, the Eighth Prince immediately changed. He was like an ice cube that slowly melted and disappeared in front of everyone. Even the ground had disappeared without a trace. At this moment, the aura in this space changed again. The overbearing aura became even more violent. After the Eighth Prince disappeared, at the same time there was a hint of life in addition to the overbearing aura. As for why he could sense it, it was because the changes in each aura were too intense. It was so intense that even ordinary people could sense it. Subai raised his head and looked at the shadow standing on the coffin. He said, "LT's coming." What was that? Was it coming? Everyone was slightly stunned. Then they followed Subai's gaze and looked at him. They immediately revealed shocked expressions. The shadow gradually solidified and turned into the appearance of a person. This person's appearance was the Eighth Prince at the beginning. Although he looked exactly like the Eighth Prince, everyone could sense that this person was not the Eighth Prince. The Eighth Prince couldn't even catch up to that overbearing aura. Resurrected from the dead, could it be that? Zhou Qing's face was pale. When this person who looked exactly like the Eighth Prince appeared, he waved his hand gently. Immediately after, cracks appeared on the tens of thousands of terracotta soldiers below. The sound of shattering could be heard without end, and this scene made people feel that it was magnificent. The cracks on the terracotta soldier fell off and living people walked out one after another. They were all living people and did not have any aura of the dead. When these living people walked out, they turned around and kneeled down on the ground facing the people on the coffin. On the coffin, the Eighth Prince waved his sleeves and placed his hands behind his back. He straightened his back and looked at Subai and the others with a domineering gaze. They are all good seedlings. The first sentence seemed to be praising them, then the second sentence came out, but the aura changed and became murderous. Great Yumifo? Chapter 169, Secret of the Imperial Family, 1, Dayuemiefu. It was just a short 4 words, but it sounded very different in everyone's ears. This voice carried an unparalleled domineering aura and unquestionable confidence. In this man's eyes it seemed that the Great Yu state should be destroyed. The people being questioned were Subai and the others. To be precise, it was Subai. Subai frowned and shook his head. He answered because he could not sense any killing intent from this person. He could not even sense any hostility. That innate domineering aura was just this man's temperament. When he answered no, the man who looked like the Eighth Prince suddenly stopped. His eyes shone with excitement like a 7 or 8-year-old child who had seen his favorite toy. Good. It's best that they're not destroyed. I'll go destroy them. The man laughed heartily. This king? At this time, hearing such a strange name, it would be really strange if they still could not see anything wrong. In the Great Chu state there was no one else who could be called this king other than King Shengyu. You are Wang Ye? Xing Shui covered her mouth with her hand and could no longer suppress the shock in her heart. I may have changed greatly, but you should recognize this. King Shengyu nodded. As he spoke, he slowly raised his right hand and a jade-like object floated above it. Tiger Tally. The moment the tiger tally appeared, Yunzihai, Zhou Qing and Qing Shui knelt on the ground at the same time and shouted in unison, "Greetings, Your Highness." The tiger amulet only recognizes the king, and seeing the tiger amulet is like seeing the king. This is a secret that the whole of Chu knows. The only one who didn't change was Su Bai, Humph. Who knew that the actions of Yunzihai and the others did not make Xingyu King happy. Instead it was replaced by a dull cold snort. This king hates people who kneel on the spot the most. If you aren't from this king's army, you don't have to kneel, or else this king will look down on you. King Shengyu's tone was deep and solemn. He seemed to have not said enough. After saying this he added another sentence, "It's hard to find anything below your knees." Yunzihai was stunned. He seemed to recall the legends about this prince, including his personality. This prince had a very strange personality. Because he had been in the army for many years, he had created a heroic aura, especially because he could not stand the so-called red tape. It was like a kneeling. In the eyes of the prince, everyone's knees were very heavy and could not be easily knelt down. At the very least, they were not from his army. Kneeling down to him would make him feel disgusted. "Get up." King Shengyu waved his sleeves with a look of disdain, then turned his gaze to Su Bai as if he was very interested. "You're not bad." "You're King Shengyu?" Su Bai rubbed his chin. "What's going on?" He was very confused now. What was going on? He was very curious as to why King Shengyu had turned into the 8th prince and everything here. After busying himself for half a day, a prince had appeared here. Everything was a little ridiculous. What was even more ridiculous was that this prince had transformed into someone else's appearance. Moreover, according to the rumors, this prince had long died. Of course, he had heard from Zhou Qing before that this place had the ability to reverse life and death. The 8th prince had died and the king of ascending secrets had come back to life. Su Bai couldn't help but guess, could this be some sort of reincarnation technique? "How dare you!" As soon as he asked this question, the 10,000 soldiers all shouted in unison. His voice shook the heavens and the earth, and the entire space trembled slightly. The murderous aura that soared into the sky came crashing down on them like an avalanche. Ha! At this moment, King Shengyu let out a series of loud laughter as if he was becoming more and more interested in Su Bai. He waved his sleeves and stopped the soldiers' murderous intent. "You're not bad, really. I didn't expect that our plan back then would have so many variables." "Do you want to know what happened here?" King Yusheng asked slowly. His gaze moved back and forth between Su Bai and the others, and the smile in his eyes grew wider and wider. Su Bai nodded decisively. "Yes, of course." In this day and age, it was not just women who liked to listen to gossip. Men's gossipy soul was not bad at all. Su Bai was very interested in this secret. Yunzihai and the others looked at each other and then nodded in unison, indicating that they also wanted to know. "Since you all want to know, this king will let you see what happened back then. In any case, this king has already come out. Even if all of this is known, it doesn't matter." King Shengyu raised his right index finger and a light flashed on it. Military formation technique, killing intent, illusion formation. Following Shengyu King's low shout, Su Bai discovered that there were strange air currents coming from the soldiers in the army. They kept circling in the sky and finally gathered together. Everything around him was becoming blurry. The huge space had disappeared, and in its place was a bright grassland. A domineering man was lying on the grass with his hands on his head and a blade of grass in his mouth. There was a hint of boredom and helplessness in his eyes. The clouds in the sky were slowly floating. They could bring a wonderful mood, but they could not change the helplessness in the man's eyes. After a while, he heard footsteps coming from the side. Chapter 170, Secret of the Imperial Family, 2. The man got up from the ground and looked at the person beside him. He pursed his lips and said, "Brother, we sneaked out to play this time. Why do you still have the aura of an emperor and pretend to be an ordinary person?" Like beside the man stood a man in ordinary clothes. He was wearing a linen shirt with some holes on it, but it looked like a gorgeous piece of clothing on this man. A noble aura rose from this man. Even from a distance one could feel the fear of a lowly person facing a superior person, as well as the panic of life and death in the other party's hands. "Emperor?" Su Bai was startled. If he couldn't hear such an obvious conversation, he would really be a fool. This man's identity was already very obvious, and that was the emperor. If this person was the emperor, then the identity of the man with the grass in his mouth would be confirmed without a doubt. King of the Ascending on the screen, the emperor of Great Chu walked to the man with grass in his mouth and sat down slowly. He sighed and said, "I've searched the entire Great Chu, searched through countless mountain ranges and crossed endless forests, but I still haven't found a way to treat you." His words were filled with helplessness and a trace of reluctance. "It's okay, brother." King Shengyu spat out the grass in his mouth and said with a smile, "If I die you can help me kill the imperial advisor of the Great Yu State. After all, he played dirty with me and he doesn't like this kind of person the most." The emperor lowered his head and continued to sigh. "If it wasn't for me you wouldn't have been poisoned by them, you wouldn't have been left with such an incurable injury, you wouldn't even be able to keep your life. So what? The Heaven Secret's poison was about exchanging one for one. If their Marshal Wushuang exchanged with me then everyone would be equal." King Shengyu continued as if he didn't take these things seriously at all. To them sometimes they had long disregarded life and death and everything was very indifferent. The grassland fell into silence and the two of them stopped talking. Other than the white clouds floating in the sky everything seemed peaceful and quiet. This was the best place to live and relax. King Yusheng lay on his back again and looked at the white clouds in the sky. "Brother, I spent half my life in the military to build a peaceful and prosperous world, don't disappoint me." In his words there was a hint of exhortation, only he dared to tell the emperor that if it was someone else, even if it was a general in the army, the emperor would not hesitate to behead him. After hearing King Shenyu's words the emperor did not say anything, instead he kept his head lowered as if he was thinking about something. Although King Shengyu was born in the army and spent half his life in the army, he was a meticulous person. In just a moment he could tell that the emperor had something on his mind, and it was not a small matter. "What are you thinking about?" King Shengyu frowned. "Can you die first?" "Bring your most proud army and fake your death together," the emperor suddenly said. King Shengyu was slightly stunned and then scratched his head. He clearly did not understand what this sentence meant. "I used the ghost sculptor to seal off all of your life force, allowing you to maintain your current state, but you are unable to recover," the emperor slowly said, "and while you are faking your death I will spread the news of your death. Then I will find someone to use a blood transfusion technique to remove the Heaven Secret's poison from your body. 10,000 soldiers will become terracotta soldiers and pretend to be buried with you." After King Shengyu heard the emperor's words he did not come back to his senses for a long time. It was obvious that the shock was too great for him to digest. After a moment King Shengyu recovered from his shock and shook his head. "The clay sculpture can only be delayed, at most it can't last forever." What he said was the truth. If it could last forever then the ability of this profession was really too heaven-defying. "I'll find the person you need in the shortest time possible. I'll even stop his strength at rank 6. It'll be useful and won't let him destroy it," the emperor said word by word, speaking very seriously. Who knew that Shengyu King would shake his head expressing his unwillingness? "If I let someone else's life save mine I wouldn't be the so-called King Shengyu. I only know how to protect others. I've protected the people of the world for my entire life, so how could I hurt them?" The emperor stood up. "Where are the people who have committed the most heinous crimes? No, I don't want to be stained with the blood of such a person. What if they are my children?" "No, wait, what did you say, brother?" King Shengyu also stood up and looked straight at the emperor. His eyes were filled with confusion. He even wondered if he had heard wrongly. The emperor's children? This was too much. "Elder brother, ever since you took office I've noticed that you've done many things, but I always believe that you're doing it for the people of the world. So no matter what you do I'll support you unconditionally. But I can't agree with what you said just now." In his mind those children were the emperor's flesh and blood. Now that he needed to use his children to save them it made him feel extremely unwilling. He had lived an open and above-board life. Why did he need a junior to save him now? If word got out, how could he still hold his head high in this lifetime? "Do you think that the poison exchange method is so easy? If you don't have the royal bloodline your strength will drop greatly after you exchange it and you might even reject it and eventually die," the emperor explained. Chapter 171, Secret of the Imperial Family, 3, King Yusheng shook his head repeatedly. "Brother, I don't have many days left, just let me die in peace. I have to leave some descendants for you. Can you hear me out first?" the emperor said seriously. King Shengyu thought about it carefully and decided to continue listening. However, he had already made up his mind. He would definitely not agree to this matter anyway. The emperor extended 3 fingers and said, "This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Moreover, it will also be of great benefit to the people of the world. Firstly, although the Great Yu State has been established, there are barbarians outside in the Great Yu State eyeing us covetously. The Jiang who is unstable inside and evil spirits are running around everywhere. If you are alive, the Great Yu State and the barbarians will not dare to step into Great Yu. Is this a benefit?" After saying that, the emperor stopped talking as if waiting for King Shengyu's reply. After pondering for a long time, King Shengyu nodded with difficulty. Other factors aside, the emperor was right. If he was here, the might of the army would be enough to intimidate them. If he died, although the Great Yu state would not dare to attack rashly, they would still be eyeing him covetously. Second, when the emperor saw that his younger brother had agreed, he raised a second finger and said, "L won't put the tiger tally in the royal treasury. While you're faking your death, I'll let the generals know and give them hope that I can give the tiger tally to them at any time so they can work harder. If they work hard, I'll be able to stabilize the border. Isn't this the second benefit?" King Shengyu was speechless. Although he did not agree, it was obvious that he had tacitly agreed. That was right. If he really died and didn't come back to life, he could use the tiger tally to do his best to stabilize the border and find a loyal person at the same time. The emperor smiled and extended a third finger. "Third, I want to test the loyalty of the entire imperial family." At this point his gaze turned cold. "I have 9 children, each of whom is a dragon and a phoenix. However, I don't know what their intentions are, so I'll use this as an opportunity to test their loyalty. If they aren't loyal, they'll become tools for your resurrection. But this has nothing to do with the people of the world." Shengyu King seemed to have finally found a point to refute and quickly said, with a point of rebuttal he could argue with reason. Even in his memory he had never won with his mouth. "I will die, you will die, but this mountain, this water, this sky, this earth, they will not die." The emperor slowly said, "LF, if I am about to die, will I pass on the throne?" King Shengyu thought about it and nodded. "If I were to pass on my legacy to a disloyal person, would Great Chu still be able to survive?" The emperor continued. King Shengyu pondered for a moment, then shook his head and nodded. "I don't know if they can survive, but the people definitely won't have it easy." Why did he nod? A person with bad moral character did not mean that he did not have power and wisdom. On the contrary, his potential and wisdom could be displayed more vividly than a person with a deep mind. This was the reason why King Shengyu nodded. As for why he shook his head, the reason was simple. Perhaps the Great Chu state could be governed well, but whether the people could be stable was still another question. Ability wasn't everything. Then I can use this method to verify whether the chances of disloyalty can be lowered in the future. This is also considered as us elders putting righteousness above family, the emperor said. If it's really as you say, I'll agree. Using a disloyal and unjust descendant as a sacrifice was akin to cleaning up the family and putting righteousness above family. Instead, there was no estrangement. The emperor smiled. He knew his younger brother's character well. He only needed to say a few words to convince him. Next, they explained the detailed plan one by one and began to communicate on the grassland. When Su Bai and the others saw their so-called plan, everyone looked at Yun Zihai with an understanding expression. By now they had already figured everything out. The 8th prince's book was given by the emperor. The poor 8th prince still thought that he had discovered all of this on his own until his death. As for Yun Zihai, he only made everything seem smoother. First, he had to let the 8th prince find the contents of the book. Second, he had to make it difficult for the 8th prince. The only surviving craftsman was arranged by the emperor. After the 1,000-faced fox discovered it through the craftsman and brought it to the 8th prince, everything would fall into place. Most importantly, he had to pressure the 8th prince, which was why Yun Zihai was involved. It was the emperor who made the 8th prince think that Yun Zihai had news and even made Yun Zihai investigate the 8th prince. In the emperor's opinion, there were at most 2 situations. The first was that Yun Zihai could not find any clues. This would put pressure on the 8th prince and allow everything to happen smoothly. The second was that Yun Zihai had found a clue, but he would definitely be obstructed in the process. As for what the obstacle was, it was the ghost sculptor. Even the ghost sculptor was the emperor's man. His goal was to stop Yun Zihai at the most critical moment. After all, in the emperor's opinion, the ghost sculptor was stronger than Yun Zihai. Of course, the ghost sculptor had already received orders not to kill Yun Zihai. Chapter 172, Secret of the Royal Family. For, after all, the emperor cherished talents. He would not let Yun Zihai die. However, there was another major mistake. That was Su Bai and the others had also joined in, and they had given the ghost sculptor a hint of pressure. At that time, the ghost sculptor could not communicate with the emperor. After all, he was afraid of being discovered. It was also at that time that the ghost sculptor had an idea. In order to complete the emperor's grand plan, he might as well kill everyone in private. It was also at that time that a series of events happened. If it weren't for Su Bai's powerful methods, they would have really died there. And the emperor's plan was already very, very deep. It was so deep that the ghost sculptor's family had been controlled by the 8th prince and had even died. He had also planted the same kind of arrangements as the ghost sculptor on the other members of the royal family in various ways. As long as any one of them showed emotions similar to the 8th prince, they would walk down this path. Unfortunately, only the world where the 8th prince was injured was achieved. This plan was completely terminated, but the scene continued. After the emperor and King Shengyu finished talking about the plan, the two of them looked at each other and fell into a tacit silence. Do you think I'm very scary? I've long lost the boldness I had when we met back then. Instead I've become a scheming villain. The emperor suddenly sighed. If you want to be a king you have to go through this. This is also the reason why I don't want to be a king. I don't think you're very scary. On the contrary, I'm your strongest backing. King Shengyu shook his head and said, this answer was not beyond the emperor's expectations. After hearing it, the emperor revealed a very carefree smile. If only I had another glass of wine. The emperor seemed to have recalled many things. Come back to the army with me later, we'll get drunk. King Shengyu said. The emperor nodded and took 2 steps forward. He had regained his noble and condescending aura, making people not dare to approach him and could only bow their heads. The surrounding wind blew, stirring up waves on the grassland. As the wind intensified, the waves became larger and larger, spreading to wherever one could see. King Shengyu looked at the emperor's back and felt that the emperor seemed very tired in front of him. The emperor placed his hands behind his back and looked up at the white clouds in the sky. The white clouds intersected with the grassland, forming a line between heaven and earth. Words came out of the emperor's mouth and his tone was extremely deep. The two of us brothers started from the bottom of the world and relied on each other. We have experienced countless life and death situations. You blocked 228 blades for me and I blocked 361 blades for you. In this world there is no deeper relationship than that of US brothers. I've changed. I've become even more scheming. I don't trust anything in the world because I have to protect the people of Great Chu. You know, at that time we couldn't even eat. It was for this reason that we decided to resist immediately. King Shengyu listened to the emperor's words and stood up silently. He walked to the emperor's side and stood side by side with him. At the same time he placed his hand on the emperor's shoulder and patted it gently. I understand. The two of them had walked the path together, so he knew his brother better than anyone else. The emperor turned his head and looked straight at King Shengyu. His eyes were filled with determination. In this world I can trust anyone but you. King Yusheng and the emperor looked at each other. A moment later the two of them looked at each other and smiled. If I can survive, the borders of Great Chu will exist. King Shengyu no longer had that calm and water-like aura from before. A domineering aura rose from his body, causing the world to be in chaos. When the domineering and noble aura intertwined, the blue sky and the green grass in the world paled in comparison. At this point the scene disappeared and everything returned to normal. King Shengyu turned around and looked at Subai. Is there anything else that you're not clear about? That's not the case. I still have a question. Why does your highness still look like the 8th prince? Subai said, according to the image just now, the Heaven Secrets poison was only introduced through the bloodline of the same race. But why did King Shengyu's appearance change? This wasn't a reincarnation. How could there be a change? I just want to see who betrayed the Great Chu royal family. King Shengyu said slowly. After saying this, King Shengyu's appearance began to change. The 8th prince's appearance disappeared and was replaced by the man in the picture. Boundless dominance rose from the king, filling the entire space and making everyone feel shaken. This king lacks a brave and resourceful person. Are you willing to become this king's subordinate and be this king's deputy general? Shengyu King suddenly reached out his hand to Subai. The domineering aura on his body disappeared completely and in its place was a thirsty look. Subai's mouth twitched. Thank you for your favor, your highness, but I'm not used to being restrained. Besides, I'm just a level 8 expert. I'm not worthy of your highness's attention. The sudden recruitment not only shocked Subai but also shocked everyone present. Chapter 173, Secret of the Royal Family, 5. Qing Shui nudged Subai and gave him a meaningful look. It seemed like he really wanted Subai to agree, to be able to become a subordinate of King Shengyu that was really soaring to the sky. Moreover, he was even given the position of deputy general. He was not an ordinary soldier. If there were people from the martial arts world here, they would definitely fight for this position. After all, this was a good thing. Subai actually directly rejected the offer. He rejected it very decisively. In the eyes of others, this was an opportunity that could allow one to soar into the sky. However, in Subai's eyes, it was not worth mentioning. Ridiculous. It was not just Qing Shui. The others also looked over. Their intentions were similar to Qing Shui's. This was King Shengyu. He was truly below one person and above 10,000 people. This was an opportunity that he could not even dream of. However, none of them said anything. After all, this was Subai's own idea and they couldn't interfere. Rank 8? King Shengyu smiled and said meaningfully, the one this king has his eyes on is you, a rank 8. Your companions added together probably won't be enough for you to fight with one hand. Don't be modest first. Subai wasn't being humble, but he was still unwilling. Whatever you want, this king can give it to you. Divine weapons pills, secret manuals, you can take them from the treasury. Shengyu King continued, When this condition was stated, everyone present widened their eyes. If the previous condition could cause the players in the game to fight until their heads bled, then the current condition would probably cause a huge shock in the game. The martial world was forever the martial world. Whether it was the strongest Confucianism, Buddhism or Taoism in Great Chu or the various famous families, they had to lower their noble heads in front of the royal family. The royal treasury was a sacred land that one could only dream of. The most important thing was to casually take them. This condition was hard to refuse, but Subai still shook his head. There should be people stronger than me. Why don't I use this kind of treatment to recruit stronger people? Subai slowly said, I yearn for other lives, Your Highness, don't force me. When this sentence was said, everyone present did the same thing. They touched their foreheads with their hands, looking very uncomfortable. They all knew Subai's personality, but they never thought that he would be so jumpy. To be honest, Subai was really tempted when he heard this condition. Don't forget that the cultivation technique manuals in the royal family's treasure vault could very likely trigger the progress bar. However, after thinking about it, he gave up on this idea and finally shook his head and refused. The reason was simple. Firstly, with his current strength, he did not want to get involved in things that were beyond his strength, otherwise it was very likely that he would not be able to spend his money. Secondly, and most importantly, there were many people with special abilities in this world, and experts were like carps crossing the river. If he grew up alone, he would be able to preserve the secret of his cheat to the greatest extent. However, if he went out and interacted with more complicated people, there was a risk that his secret would be discovered. The golden finger was his everything, the source of his true development. Looking at the emperor, the plans he had seen in the video gave people the impression that he was extremely shrewd and farsighted. If one didn't have strong hardware conditions to fight with such an old fox, it was very likely that they would become someone else's chess piece and expose their own situation. Lord Shengyu was overbearing and seemed to have spent his entire life in the army. His personality seemed very simple on the surface. However, when he communicated with the emperor, it was obvious that he was very meticulous. Subai felt that it was still too dangerous to come into contact with these things now. Saiwan is hard to find. King Yu Shang sighed. What I value is your potential. It has nothing to do with your strength. It's a pity that you're unwilling. As he spoke, Xingyu King didn't seem to want to talk too much about this, so he took out a jade token from his waist and threw it into Subai's hand. Subai took it and looked at it carefully. It was as smooth as jade, and there were all kinds of complicated patterns carved on it. If you change your mind, take this jade token and go to the capital to find the emperor. The doors of my army are open for you, King Shengyu said boldly. Subai was slightly surprised. This action had increased his impression of him by quite a bit. He thought that King Yusheng would at least appear angry, but he didn't think that he didn't care at all and even gave him such generous conditions. Do you think this king will get angry? King Shengyu looked at what Subai was thinking and laughed. This king is very open-minded about talents. If you can't be used by this king, as long as you don't do anything to harm Great Chu, this king won't mind at all. Thank you, Your Highness. Subai put away the jade token in his hand and cupped his hands. No matter what, the king's magnanimity was commendable. King Shengyu stopped talking and looked up, his gaze gradually converging. Alright, that's enough. Now it's time to go up and meet that old friend. She has been waiting for a long time. Old friend? After saying this, everyone present was very confused. In a while you can watch from the side. The battle between us will be of great benefit to you, King Shengyu said slowly and waved his sleeves around. Chapter 174, Female Abby Dean and the Shifting Stars. 1. Just as King Shengyu finished waving his sleeves, a strange change occurred in the surroundings. The ground began to buzz and shake at an irregular frequency. Huge cracks suddenly appeared on the wall above. After the crack appeared, it did not collapse. It just kept moving to the two sides like a door that was opening. They were underground, so there was a distance from the surface. However, as the crack gradually expanded, the distance did not seem to be that far. The ground began to rise, dragging Subai and the others away from this space. At the same time, King Shengyu and the 10,000 troops also gradually rose. The cracks in front of them were like doors that gradually opened, and they were no longer an obstacle to them. With this constant rising force, in the blink of an eye, a faint ray of moonlight appeared on the wall not far away. The moonlight was hazy, but when it shone into the dark environment, it appeared unusually gentle, infusing a trace of warmth into the darkness. There seems to be a strong enemy above. Subai raised his head and looked at the moonlight. In the darkness, King Yusheng did not speak. He only looked up with the help of the moonlight. Hearing this, Yunzihai nodded his head cautiously. They could feel that something was wrong with the current situation. As the crack on the top grew bigger and bigger, their speed of rising also became faster and faster. When the crack gradually grew to a certain extent, the speed of rising led them to the ground. The moonlight was bright and clear. Compared to the underground space just now, the ground seemed a little lively. When Subai and the others appeared on the ground and looked up at the same time, they were all stunned when they saw the figure floating in the sky. At this moment there was a woman in the sky covered in moonlight. This woman was wearing a Taoist robe and her hair was slanted, her eyes were filled with madness. In fact, this woman was very beautiful and her appearance could topple a country. However, that trace of madness and chaos made people not dare to approach her and fear her. Even the moonlight that enveloped her body became blurry and distorted. The distorted moonlight combined with the aura of madness and the crazy expression on the woman's face made it seem even more terrifying. Female Abby Dean? Subai was stunned. He recognized her at a glance. Wasn't she the Abby Dean who had left a handprint in the inn post house? He still remembered that after the female Abby Dean left the palm print, she stepped on the air and disappeared into the distance. Now she suddenly appeared in front of him, which made him feel extremely surprised. Of course, Subai was not the only one who was surprised. Other than Yunzihai and the others who showed shocked expressions, even King Shengyu frowned. Jade face? We haven't met for many years. Why are you like this? Why is your aura so chaotic? King Shengyu asked calmly. He remembered that when he faked his death, Jade Face Monastery was still the abbot of Jade Face Monastery, but now what had happened? As the saying goes, when a person is isolated from the world for too long, it will cause a situation where they fall behind. At this moment King Shengyu was the same. He was a little confused about the current situation, especially when he felt the confusion of the female Abby Dean. He had doubts in his heart. The female Abby Dean was tilting her head and sizing up the crowd below. However, when King Shengyu said those two words, she suddenly stopped. The madness in his eyes was still there, not replaced by anything. What was closest to the madness was a look of doubt. Jade face? The female Abby Dean quickly recovered. She tilted her head again, sized up King Shengyu and took a step forward. The madness returned to normal. It was even more intense than before. If one got too close, they would even be affected. Why did she? King Shengyu turned his head and was about to ask Subai, but the moment he turned his head, the female Abby Dean suddenly launched an attack. The aura of madness gradually spread. The female Abby Dean raised her jade-like left hand and gently pressed down on King Shengyu and his army. It was such an extremely simple action, but the madness in the surroundings seemed to have eaten a panacea as it expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not good. Lord Shengyu turned his head back and raised his right hand. A jade-like sword appeared out of thin air. Immediately after, the 10,000 soldiers raised their weapons in unison. Kill them. An extremely terrifying killing intent suddenly appeared and spiraled in the air, forming an invisible barrier. At the same time, the barrier enveloped Subai and the others. Boom! He didn't see how the two of them fought, but he felt a loud bang that shook the heavens and the earth, and the ground began to collapse crazily. The speed of the collapse was spreading to the surroundings. Wherever it passed, the trees and soil would not remain. Everything would be turned into ashes. This was just a casual palm strike from the female Abby Dean, but there was no living thing within a radius of 10 miles. Fortunately, this was the wilderness. Other than them, no one was willing to come over, so no one was killed. Jade face, have you gone mad? King Shengyu frowned. At this moment he could also see that the female Abby Dean was not conscious at all. At this moment the female Abby Dean was a mixture of all kinds of chaos. That I'll kill you. King Shengyu held the long sword in his right hand and raised it horizontally. His left hand brushed the edge of the long sword. Chapter 175, Female Abby Dean and the Shifting Stars, 2. As he finished speaking, the surrounding soldiers began to alternate their positions. In the blink of an eye they formed a unique military formation. The power of the king lies in the battle array. Even mortal soldiers could slaughter all living beings. Moreover, there were 10,000 elite soldiers here. It was even more impressive when gathered together. This army formation was like a sharp spear that was flashing with a cold light. Anyone who saw it would feel their hair stand on end. Kill them. One word: long snake. A terrifying killing intent suddenly appeared and condensed into a huge snake sweeping toward the female Abby Dean. Compared to the snake, the Abby Dean was like a tiny ant. The long snake carried a terrifying killing intent as if it was going to shatter the world. The clouds in the sky were dissipating and the moonlight was blurred by this killing intent. The female Abby Dean raised her right hand and slashed at the long snake below. The surrounding air became scorching hot. A ball of flame appeared from the Abby Dean's palm and spread along the sky. In the blink of an eye, the area within 100 miles had turned into a sea of fire. The flames collided with the long snake, rolling in the air and entering a stalemate. At this moment King Shengyu raised his sword and pointed it at the female Abby Dean. Change. As he finished speaking, the soldiers began to change their formation again. A strange shape appeared on the ground like a water droplet. Due to the scorching heat of the flames, the surrounding air became hot. At this moment the hot air was descending at an extremely fast speed. Snowflakes began to fall from the originally cloudless sky. The snowflakes were extremely cold. They fell on the female Abby Dean's head and clothes, instantly forming layers of frost. after the temperature of the flames. Dropped. The long snake got rid of the flames and engulfed the Abbey Dean again. Fierce flames surged into the sky and there was no life within 100 miles. The female Abbey Dean was swallowed by the long snake and disappeared into the sky. However, this situation did not last for even a breath. The long snake split open and the female Abbey Dean escaped from it. After she left, the corner of the female head's mouth was stained with blood. It was obvious that she was injured. However, even though he was seriously injured, that madness still did not disappear. The female Abbey Dean raised her hand again. She bent her middle finger and flicked it at the sky. In the next moment, killing intent suddenly appeared. In the sky, a long snake that was exactly the same as before appeared. Boundless Tao scripture. It could simulate everything. After the long snake appeared, it charged towards King Shengyu's army. King Shengyu snorted coldly. The boundless Tao scripture is only a simulation. He raised his long sword and the same long snake appeared, but it was much stronger than the one simulated by the female Abbey Dean. The two long snakes collided with each other and fought in the air. Although I don't know why you're delirious, this king will not allow a delirious expert to continue living in the human world. King Shengyu said slowly, this king knows that you have a kind heart, but this king needs to consider the people of Great Chu. After you die, this king will personally bury you. The formation changed again. His killing intent suddenly soared. Compared to before, it had already soared by more than 10 times. Heaven slaughtering army formation. King Shengyu said coldly, boom. A loud bang echoed between heaven and earth and all things were frightened. In front of everyone's eyes, the world seemed to have lost its color. The next moment, the female Abbey Dean spat out blood. Blood dyed the sky and she fell from the sky. King Shengyu was about to continue attacking, but he did not expect a strange array to appear in midair. The female Abbey Dean landed on the array and quickly disappeared. The 1,000-mile-inch formation of Tao sect and the boundless Tao scripture are really strange cultivation techniques. King Shengyu frowned. He only had 10,000 elite soldiers. If he had more soldiers, he could have killed the female Abbey Dean just now and even prevented her from escaping. What a pity. Shengyu King shook his head. When he returned, he had to tell his brother the emperor that he had to get rid of this unstable factor as soon as possible. Brother Su. Just as he was thinking this, a shout came from the side. King Shengyu was stunned. He turned around and found that there were only Yunzihai and the other two on the scene. Subai had already disappeared. What's going on? He quickly walked over and grabbed Yunzihai's collar. His eyebrows were raised and he was furious. Just now, when the female Abbey Dean disappeared, a similar formation appeared under Brother Su's feet and then disappeared. Yunzihai looked at the spot where Subai had disappeared, his face blank. He finally understood the current situation. Subai's sudden disappearance meant that the female Abbey Dean had taken him away. The reason why the female Abbey Dean came here was perhaps, it wasn't for the sake of becoming King but for Subai. Clouds from the sea to hear sorrow comes from here. Originally everything was already coming to an end, but this thing happened. Brother Su, I've let Wu down. He felt terrible. At the same time, he knew very well that Subai, was likely that he was already dead. If it was a sane Abbey Dean, she would be kind, but the Abbey Dean was crazy. No one knew what a lunatic and a powerful one at that could do. Bastard. King Shengyu pushed Yunzihai to the ground and said angrily, no one has ever been able to snatch away my people, generals. Yes. Activate the formation. Heaven and Earth Soul Search. I accept your orders. The military formation underwent another huge change. At the same time, King Shengyu closed his eyes. After a breath or two, he opened them again. Chapter 176, Female Abbey Dean and the Shifting Stars, 3, Chase. He only said a simple word, but the soldiers seemed to be connected to him. Without a word, they changed the array and soon disappeared into the corner of the sky with King Shengyu. The surroundings fell silent. Only Yunzihai and the other two were left at the scene. Everyone's expressions were different. I harmed Brother Su, Yunzihai said dejectedly. This was the second time he had said such words. The first time was when he met the ghost sculptor. But could a ghost sculptor compare to the female Abbey Dean? Not even a finger. If Subai fell into the hands of the crazy female Abbey Dean, he would probably be doomed. Lord Yun, you are truly worried. Qing Shue's brows were filled with worry as she said, the female Abbey Dean is obviously just taking him away. If she really wanted to kill him, she would have done so long ago. Sheng Shui did not have much confidence when she said this, but at least it was a hope. Are we still waiting here? Zhou Chang asked. Among them, Yunzihai had the deepest relationship with Subai, followed by Qing Shui. Zhou Chang did not have much interaction with Subai, so he did not suffer much. Huisheng County. Yunzihai said, let's go back first. If Brother Su is fine, he will return to the bodyguard agency. After all, it's his property. They were still in the wilderness and there would be no news if they stayed in the same place. It was better to return to the county first. that way at least there would be a place to receive news. Jun Zihai practically forced himself to be spirited, bringing Qing Shui and the other two out of the wilderness. On the other side, Subai looked at the people below with a dumbfounded expression. That's right, it was below. He was riding on the back of the female Abidine and was running with her. To be more precise, the female Abipian was carrying the black cloth on her back. At that moment he only felt a blur in front of his eyes, and then it became like this. Was there a mistake? I'm just a bystander, I'm just here to eat melons. How did he end up eating melons? Subai was speechless, and most importantly, couldn't he change to a more special running posture? He felt weird being carried by a beautiful woman. Subai felt the surrounding scenery and quickly moved backward. His entire body followed the female Abidine's, running up and down, very uncomfortable. Wait. Subai couldn't take it anymore and shouted. The female Abidine turned around, still maintaining her running posture. She tilted her head and looked at him. The madness in her eyes did not change at all. Then Subai felt his vision shake. When it returned to normal, he was in a position where the female Abidine was hugging him. Subai was speechless. I said, wait, not change positions. Besides, I'm a grown man. Isn't it a little inappropriate for a beautiful woman like you to carry me like a princess? Subai wrapped his arms around the Abidine's neck and sighed. Forget it, I'll just treat it as a mount. He wanted to resist, but he temporarily suppressed his thoughts. After all, with the Abidine's abilities, resistance was useless, and looking at his current state, it seemed that the female Abidine had no intention of killing him. Instead, she wanted to take him somewhere. Riding on his mount all the way, he was already very far from the county. Subai heard the sound of the wind in his ears gradually weakening, then the surrounding scenery gradually stopped. He realized that he had arrived in a hidden cave. That. Senior, can you put me down first? Subai thought for a moment and tried to communicate with the female Abidine. Due to the close distance between the two of them, when he raised his head, he saw a pair of crazy eyes. The female Abidine was still in a state of madness. Even though she was holding Subai, she had not regained her senses. Subai only felt his body relax. He realized that the female Abidine had placed him on the ground. He immediately turned over and grabbed Ghost Head Blade by his waist. Are you here? Since he had been put down, this was his destination. He did not know what would happen next, however he needed to be on guard. The Abidine suddenly reached out her hand and slapped Subai's chest. His speed wasn't fast and his strength wasn't great either. However, Subai didn't relax. A black light rose from his body, then he used stellar transposition. The palm strike was completely neutralized and attacked the female Abidine at the same time. The female Abidine tilted her head and withstood the palm strike. Her body did not waver at all. Subai raised his eyebrows. The palm strike just now was not the Abidine's strength at all. It was only about the strength of the 7th stage. But why would he use the power of a rank 7? Subai was confused. However, he seemed to have found an unusual clue. The female Abidine seemed to have gone mad, but she felt that something was guiding her, making her act according to some rules in her madness. For example, how could a crazy person suddenly weaken his strength to attack? Also, she took him away for no reason, as if she had a purpose. He now seriously suspected that the female Abidine was not here to find King Shengyu at all, but specifically to find him. It was only because King Shengyu was there that the two of them fought. Of course, this was just a guess. As for how to verify it, there was no way yet. As Subai was thinking, the female Abidine made her move. The female Abidine casually took 2 steps forward, then the power in her body began to circulate with an unusual rule. Chapter 177, Female Abidine and the Shifting Stars. 4. Subai was stunned for a moment before he reacted. When the female Abidine had circulated her power, he had felt that it was quite familiar. Now he realized that it was actually his shifting stars. The boundless Tao scripture simulated his stellar transposition. But what was the Abidine moving? Subai was very familiar with the way it worked. They were indeed using shifting stars, but no one attacked the female Abidine. She was fighting herself. That's right, he was fighting himself. In front of Subai, the female Abidine's expression was gradually becoming clear, but compared to the madness, it was like a drop in the ocean. That was all. There was only a trace of clarity. Subai touched his chin. He seemed to know who the female Abidine was using the shifting stars on just now. If he was not wrong, he was trying to move all of the crazy consciousness out, but it was obvious that he did not succeed. Perhaps it was because the grade of star transposition was not good enough. Soon the trace of clarity on the female Abidine's body disappeared. She also stopped using stellar transposition. She tilted her head and looked at Subai with a crazy expression on her face. Subai held the ghost head blade in his hand and looked at each other intently. It didn't take long before the female Abidine turned around and left the cave without any hesitation. Subai was speechless. This was something he had not expected. He thought that something bad would happen next, but he didn't expect it to be over just like that. What is his purpose? Subai frowned and pondered. After thinking for a long time, he still could not understand what the other party was thinking. Could it be that it was just for the sake of shifting stars? There seemed to be some clues. The idea of using the stellar transposition technique to transfer the madness out of her body seemed to be feasible. However, there were too few clues in front of him. No matter how he thought about it, he could not guess more. Subai shook his head to get rid of these thoughts. Let's go back first. He had received too much information about the situation, and he was in such a dire situation. It was best to return to a safe place first. Thinking of this, Subai didn't dwell on it anymore. He got up and left the cave. As soon as he walked out, he happened to meet King Shengyu and his troops. When more than 10,000 soldiers rushed over, the scene was very grand. The surrounding trees were instantly flattened. Subai, where is Jade Face? As soon as King Shengyu appeared, he looked around as if he wanted to beat the female Abby Dean to death. Let's go. Subai shrugged. He didn't speak nonsense and told her the reason: simulation ability. King Yusheng frowned as if he was carefully thinking about the cause and effect. Any clues? Subai asked. I want to return to the capital as soon as possible and think of a way to kill her directly. King Shengyu shook his head. Good heavens, Subai called him an expert. This solution to the problem, he actually greatly agreed. Finding clues was a very troublesome matter. It was better to find the person directly and kill him, then all the consequences would be gone. Alright, since you are fine, this king will leave. Logically speaking, King Shengyu still wanted to talk to Subai. After all, it was rare to meet such a talent. However, now that such a thing had happened, he had to hurry up and go back. However, before he left, King Yusheng reminded him, this king's words are worth 1,000 gold. No matter when and where, as long as you are willing, this king's door will always be open for you. After saying this, King Yusheng left with his army. Subai rubbed the space between his eyebrows and looked up at the moon in the sky. The moonlight was like silver shining down on the ground that had been raised to the ground. So there is someone as interesting as King Shengyu in the imperial family. Subai thought to himself. From the moment he met King Shengyu until now, the impression he gave him was that he was a very bold person. No wonder he had been in the army for half his life. If such a person were to become a prince in the officialdom, he would probably chop off the heads of many of those rotten officials in a few days. Let's pick up the county. Everything was coming to an end. Subai didn't want to stay here any longer. He took advantage of the moonlight and rushed to Shang County. Outside the escort agency, Yun Zihai, Qing Shui and the others had been standing on the street outside waiting for Subai to return. I might have to go. Zhou Qing looked at the sky and braced himself to say this. With such a big matter happening, he had to go back and report to Prince 6. Otherwise, if he delayed the opportunity, he would lose the upper hand. Yun Zihai did not speak, and neither did Qing Shui. The two of them seemed to have tacitly agreed and allowed Zhou Qing to leave. Zhou Qing thought about it, gritted his teeth and left in the dark. At this moment, only Yun Zihai and Qing Shui were left on this street. I'm not leaving because I want to wait. Yun Zihai's voice was hoarse. Brother Su and I hit it off at first sight. If he really can't come back, I'll build a cenotaph for him. But why don't you leave? Qing Shui stared at the entrance of the agency and said, he saved me twice. I must wait for his news here. This is the first reason. Second, he is valued by King Shengyu. For the sake of the 9th princess, it is worth it for me to wait here. Unlike other people, she was straightforward and didn't speak vaguely. This was her true thoughts. Firstly, Subai had saved her twice. Secondly, Subai's identity was different now. Chapter 178, Female Abby Dean and the Shifting Stars. 5. He didn't know how to hide it, and there was no need to hide it. Sometimes those little schemes were disdainful to smart people. Yun Zihai smiled bitterly. You're really direct. It's a pity for Zhou Qing. If Brother Su really comes back, he will lose a good impression of Brother Su. Everyone has their own choices. If they make a choice, they have to pay the price for the consequences of this choice, Qing Shui said. Yun Zihai did not say anything else. He stared at the bodyguard agency without blinking. His eyes were filled with guilt and sadness. The street was so quiet that it was terrifying. At this time, even the night watchman did not pass by the bodyguard agency. As time passed, the night sky grew darker. Every time the night sky grew darker, Yun Zihai's mood would become heavier. He knew that the longer he waited, the more insecure Subai would be. Time slowly passed and a faint light appeared in the sky. The streets became lively. At this moment, the commoners who had been preparing to work since morning saw the parents of the county magistrate and a woman standing in front of the bodyguard agency. Let's go. Yun Zihai stood up and looked at the increasing number of people around him as well as the sun that was gradually rising in the sky. His face was full of disappointment. Clearly he had reached the limit of despair. Qing Shui didn't say a word and just sighed silently. Was that man really dead? What a pity. If he was given time, he would definitely be able to take the lead. The accident was really too sudden. The two of them looked at each other and prepared to part ways. However, at this moment they heard a voice and hurriedly turned their heads. Then their expressions froze. Why are you two guarding my house? Why don't you go back to the yamen? Go to the yamen, wait for you all night, go to your room to sleep all night. Subai was holding a paper bag in his hand. He was using his other hand to take out a white steamed bun from the paper bag. He put it into his mouth and his mouth was filled with the fragrance of the steamed bun. Yun Zihai was speechless, Qing Shui was speechless. Do you want to eat? Subai handed it over. The two of them looked at each other speechlessly. They were so scared that after guarding the place for the whole night, Subai directly fell asleep in the yamen. When he woke up in the morning, he even had a considerate breakfast. Qing Shui gritted her teeth and said, "El knew he wouldn't die." Yun Zihai returned to normal. He was about to walk up and give Subai a warm hug, but Subai stopped him. "Stop it, don't say goodbye, sister. Qing Shui can hug me, you're a man." Subai walked towards Qing Shui. Qing Shui naturally took out the remaining silver thorns and played with them in her hand. Subai looked up at the sky and felt that he had joked enough. It was time to get down to business. After finishing the rest of the buns in 2 or 3 bites, Subai gave Yun Zihai and Qing Shui a look and asked them to follow him. Then he walked straight into the bodyguard agency. Yun Zihai and Qing Yun did not understand what was going on either, but when they saw Subai's intention, they still followed behind. It was very early at this time and there was no one in the escort agency. After entering the agency, they followed Subai to the room in the backyard. After opening the door, Subai stepped in first. He called the two of them to sit down and closed the door. "I thought about it all night. Last night." Subai closed the door, turned around and looked at Yun Zihai. "This matter can be considered to have entered an end. There's basically no follow-up." Yun Zihai nodded. "I'll write a letter today and go straight to the capital to tell your majesty what happened." No matter what happened in the middle or what the emperor had planned, Yun Zihai knew that he had been schemed against by the emperor. However, he had already completed his mission. The emperor would fulfill his so-called promise. Finally, Yun Zihai added, "I'll fulfill Brother Su's request as soon as possible. When the time comes, Brother Su can come and find me. We can discuss which cultivation techniques you need." Subai's contribution to this incident could not be underestimated. Yun Zihai was a person of integrity, so he would naturally honor Subai's credit. "I will also send a messenger pigeon to the 9th princess in advance today to let her prepare. Also, I will be leaving today." Qing Shui stared at Subai thoughtfully and told him about her departure today. She should have left a long time ago. She had participated in it for no reason and had not returned until now. However, it was all worth it. At least the 9th princess would rise because of this incident. As for Subai, Qing Shui sighed silently. If it was in the past, she would have wanted to recruit talents for the princess, but now she had given up. How could the 9th princess dare to interfere with a talent that even King Shengyu dreamed of? Even if Subai really agreed, the 9th princess would not dare to accept it. "You dare to accept the person your imperial uncle likes? Aren't you afraid of death?" Therefore Qing Shui had already given up on this plan. Ahem. Subai pretended to cough and said, "Actually, I thought about it all night last night. Although we've settled this matter, I have to think about my future, so I have a plan that requires Brother Yun's help." Chapter 179. Subai pointing at Fuyin Post House. When Subai said this, Yun Zihai was clearly stunned. Then Yun Zihai's face was filled with confusion as he scratched his head, not knowing what Subai wanted to say. If he had a request, what else could he help with? Qing Shui was also confused. She didn't know what was going on, but Subai didn't call her or ask her to leave. This meant that she could stay here and listen. Everyone was smart. Qing Shui knew that since Subai didn't want her to leave, he must have wanted her to hear what he was going to say next. "After this matter is over, His Majesty will receive the news. Naturally, you will be rewarded." Subai stared at Yun Zihai and smiled. Hearing this, Yun Zihai nodded, indicating that it was indeed so. At the end he added, "Brother Su, don't worry. I'll definitely help you get those 2 cultivation techniques. I, Yun Zihai, keep my word." He thought that Subai had hurriedly expressed that he would not go back on his word because of the 2 cultivation techniques. He would definitely keep his promise to Subai. Subai shook his head and said, "I can still trust Brother Yun's character. I'm not asking you for help because of this matter. I just want to ask, which mansion do you plan to work for in the future?" Previously he had heard of the agreement between Yun Zihai and the emperor. Once Yun Zihai completed this matter, the emperor would give Yun Zihai a residence and let Yun Zihai be the governor. Moreover, everything in this residence would be managed by Yun Zihai himself. It could be said to be a very great power. After all, up until now there had never been such a precedent in Great Chu. This could be considered as the first time. Of course, this was also what Yun Zihai dreamed of. He could manage it himself and did not have to care about the disputes of power around him. He could do his best to give peace to the places under his jurisdiction. This was his lifelong pursuit. "Brother Yun, I won't say anything else. We're straightforward people, so I'll be straightforward. I want to go to the mansion under your jurisdiction and become the Yin Post House's captain." Subai didn't bother hiding his thoughts anymore. His previous plan was to stay in Shang County and become the Yin Post House leader. but last night he had completely changed his mind. The reason was simple, it was because of the female Abbey Dean. Last night King Shengyu and the female Abbey Dean had fought to the point that the sky was dark and the sun and moon were dark. It could be said that there was no one else who could match them. After that he was brought to the cave by the female Abbey Dean. He kept thinking that this world was still too dangerous for him. He had originally planned to develop slowly, but it seemed that it was still not possible. He had to grow up quickly, just as Lu Su and No Flower had said. Sheng County was too small, especially for Subai. It was so small that it made one's hair stand on end. Even if it was the Yin Post House, the group of people who did business would not bring many things that could trigger the progress bar. However, the prefecture was different. It was even higher than the Dao order he had obtained from killing the county magistrate. It was enough for him to trigger more progress bars. Moreover, Yun Zihai would be the governor of that place, a parent official. Wasn't this a relationship between the two of them? In this day and age he still had to be more worldly, right? He had a friend who was a prefecture magistrate. He was very smooth. When Subai said this, Yun Zihai's expression was dull. After a long while he finally reacted. Immediately after, his dull expression disappeared and revealed a look of ecstasy. If Brother Su is willing, I welcome you. This was really a pleasant surprise, at least to Yun Zihai. Actually, before he accepted this mission he had already started planning how to govern the area under his jurisdiction. Once he succeeded, the most difficult part was the Yin Post House. The reason was actually very simple. The Yin Post House was a place in the wilderness. It was time-consuming and laborious to manage it. Moreover, the Yin Post House was very important and required a lot of effort. Now Subai actually said that he wanted to go to the residence under his jurisdiction and become a station chief. What else was there to think about? If he agreed, it would be over. If he didn't agree, would he be a fool? With Subai around, he could rest assured. Brother Su, there's absolutely no problem. We've already decided on this matter. Yun Zihai quickly agreed. Subai was speechless. Why did he feel like he was losing out? Was it really a loss? Something was wrong. Subai fell into deep thought. He felt that when he said it just now he should have added some additional conditions, such as getting some benefits. Unfortunately, it was too late to change his mind now. Qing Shue's expression was complicated. Her gaze stopped on Subai, thinking about many things. She understood why Subai wanted her to stay here and why he wanted her to hear their conversation. He was telling her the truth in front of everyone. What he had said before was not perfunctory but the truth. Subai had said before that he would not help the ninth princess. Now he was using Qing Shue's eyes to tell the ninth princess that he was not lying. He really did not want to go. I'd rather go to the Yin Post House than go to the capital. I don't want to get involved in the fight between you two. This was Su Bail's answer. This man was very thin. At the same time, it made Qing Shue feel that the other side of this man was so unfathomable. What Subai had done just now was equivalent to giving the ninth princess a way out. Chapter 180, Subai pointing at Fuing Post House. 2. Not only would he not offend anyone, but he would also make the ninth princess feel good about him. Sometimes one really had to pay attention to one's emotional intelligence when doing things. If you give others face, others will give you face. If you don't care about face, others will definitely give you face. Of course, if he met someone who gave him enough face but didn't give him face, he could just go up and slap him. I'm leaving today, Subai. The trip to the county has given me too much excitement, but I still have to thank you for saving me twice. Qing Shui bowed slightly to Subai. Right was right, wrong was wrong. If others were kind, they would definitely thank them. Give me a farewell hug. Subai opened his hand and teased. He thought that it was just a joke, but he did not expect a warm body to fall into his arms. He was gently hugged by Qing Shui. I'll tell the ninth princess that you're a person who stands aloof from worldly affairs. Qing Shui let go of her hand and said. Subai smiled. This hug actually gave me a surprise. I didn't expect that Miss Qing Shui, who looked ordinary at first, had a hidden agenda. Qing Shui looked straight into Subai's eyes. Other than the calmness in Subai's eyes, she did not see any ripples. Beauty won't be able to move you, so I can go back with peace of mind. At least you won't stand opposite us because of beauty. Since they could become the ninth princess's personal maids, they were naturally 100 times better at observing people's expressions. From the hug to the departure, the expression in Su Bail's eyes did not change. Is that so? If it's Miss Qing Shui, I can consider it. Subai said those words, but his eyes were calm. Qing Shui didn't say anything. She knew that Subai was just teasing her. After that, Yun Zihai and Qing Shui did not stay any longer. After discussing what to do next, the two of them left. Qing Shui set off for the capital. Yun Zihai returned to the county office. At least before he left, he had to arrange the rest of his things so that the new county magistrate could take over smoothly. After the two of them left, Subai stretched and opened the window of the room. He looked at the sun hanging high in the sky and the white clouds in the blue sky. Continue, liver. Zhou Qing took out the nameless saber scripture. Looking at the progress bar on it, Subai sat at the seat closest to the window and focused. Time would not treat everyone differently, it was fair to everyone and would not stop because of someone. During this period of time, the major events of upgrading the county happened one after another. The moment King Shengyu walked out of the tomb, major events happened everywhere. The old antiques who had lived since the very beginning all looked at the sky above their heads in deep thought. A unique killing intent appeared between heaven and earth. Although it was very faint, it fused with heaven and earth again. His Majesty's thoughts are indeed something we couldn't guess. This was what the old antiques thought in unison. After they had this thought, they all fell silent. Back then, the ill-tempered King Shengyu was different from the emperor. He would charge straight at the emperor if there was a disagreement. This also caused many people in the martial world to remember what King Shengyu had done. Now they still felt a little embarrassed when they thought about it. They restricted their disciples to be careful with their words and actions and not to offend this prince. In the imperial palace, in a spacious and magnificent hall, the door was tightly shut. At the door stood two eunuchs in eunuch uniforms. Ha ha ha. A hearty laughter suddenly sounded from inside the room. Even the entire palace could hear it clearly. My little brother is alive. Ha ha ha. Someone pass on the order to the 9th princess. The imperial palace is holding a grand ceremony regardless of expenses. Yes, sir. The two eunuchs at the door bowed in agreement. When one of them raised his head, he had already disappeared from where he was. No one could see how he had disappeared. There were experts everywhere in the imperial palace. Even a gatekeeping eunuch could not be underestimated. Titanium temple. Inside the scripture depository, No Flower sat cross-legged in a corner of the sutra depository. In front of him there were already 3 layers of Buddhist scriptures piled up. There were so many that it made one's scalp go numb. From time to time, monks would walk in and out of the sutra depository. When they saw No Flower in the corner, they shook their heads in unison. Ever since she came back last time, she had been staying in the sutra depository. She did not read any books related to her own strength. She just stared at the Buddhist scriptures, reading them word by word. His senior brothers and sisters didn't understand, but they didn't disturb him and went about their own business. But today, No Flower seemed to be different. In the corner of the sutra depository, No Flower was still sitting cross-legged. His eyes were no longer dull but tightly shut. After an unknown period of time, this state gradually disappeared and his tightly shut eyes slowly opened. No Flower let out a long breath. The confusion he had previously had been completely resolved. He stood up from the ground and did not continue to sit cross-legged. Instead, he sorted out the Buddhist scriptures in front of him one by one before walking out of the sutra library and coming to his master's room. Duo. No Flower knocked on the door, then put down his hand and kept his palms together. Enter. His master Kong Chan's voice rang out in the room. No Flower pushed the door open and walked inside. Chapter 181, Subai pointing at Fuing Post House. 3. After entering the room, he turned around and closed the door. Only then did he come in front of Kong Chan and slowly greet him. Kong Chan looked at the scar on top of Wu Hua's head and smiled. Didn't expect my disciple to be so talented. After untying the knot in his heart, he actually jumped grades and reached rank 6. The scar on the top of the titanium temple's head was caused by them. Whether they were strong or not had a direct reaction to the scar. Master disciple has already understood everything and is no longer disturbed by the karma in front of him. No Flower bowed. What plans do you have in the future? Kong Chan asked. He didn't ask what was on her mind, he only asked her about her future plans. After all, everyone had different ways to break out of this situation. It was pointless to ask. Disciple wants to continue staying in the Heaven Inspectorate. Since I've already entered rank 6, I'll take the position of chief and manage the affairs of the prefecture. No Flower said respectfully. Oh? Kong Chan was slightly surprised. The Department of Heaven Supervision was divided into Heaven, Zhangli, Jingzhou, Fu and Dao. It could be said that the hierarchy was clear. Kong Chan had thought that Wu Hua would leave the Heaven Inspectorate, but she did not expect him to do the opposite. There are many things that disciple cannot do, but there are many things that disciple can do. As long as one is in a place within the scope of disciple's authority, one can do anything. No Flower rubbed his bald head and said, Your Majesty. Kong Chan hesitated for a moment before speaking. However, after saying 2 words, she shut her mouth. No Flower raised his head. His gaze was firm. His Majesty sacrificed a small number of people's lives to save more. Even now I still don't approve of it, but I won't interfere because everyone has different thoughts? Kong Chan said. No, because if I interfere I will die. No Flower said seriously, but I still have a lot of dreams to fulfill. I can't die. Kong Chan was speechless. He said it directly, but that was exactly what he meant. If you dare to disobey His Majesty, I don't care what kind of genius disciple you are, you'll have to go to the execution ground first. No Flower's words were very realistic, but they also made sense. This was also what Kong Chan admired the most. If one foolishly cultivated Buddhism but did not understand the principles of the world, one would become a fool when one cultivated to the end. Then go ahead and take the exam. Oh right, there's one more thing about Subai, you might want to hear it. Kong-chan smiled. No Flower was stunned, then subconsciously asked what was going on. Kong-chan didn't waste any time and told him everything about Subai and Shang Yu King. In this day and age, how could there be a wall that did not leak? Of course Kong-chan didn't know that Shang Yu King valued Subai very much, she only knew that Subai was involved. No Flower slowly recovered his expression normal. If it had happened to you, it would be normal. Do you think so highly of Subai? Kong-chan's interest was piqued. No Flower nodded and told him about his experience with Subai. If there's a chance we can meet. Kong-chan's interest grew. In the room the master and disciple chatted more and more. Green Cloud Academy. Inside the library, Lu Su held a book in her hand and was leaning against the window on the second floor. She looked at the night sky and read the book in her hand. After returning to the Green Cloud Academy, she had already stayed in the library for a long time. She had read all the books on this floor. After watching day and night, her strength had long reached the peak of the 8th stage. She was only one step away from entering the 7th stage realm. However, she was unable to step into it and remained at the peak. Even though she had read all the 7th grade books on this floor, she still did not make any progress. What are you reading? Unknowingly, Lu Su's mind had shifted away from the book and was completely focused on the night in front of her. The scenery of the Green Cloud Academy was very good. It was filled with the smell of books. Even an ordinary person would be influenced by it if they stepped in. Looking at the beautiful night sky, Lu Su's mood became more and more irritable to the point that she couldn't calm down. She had been back for so long, but she was still unable to break through her demonic barrier and was trapped here. Her teacher Wang Qingfeng had told her to come to the library to find the answer, but she never found it. Instead, she became more and more confused. Most of the content in the book was to clarify one principle. In these books, the reason why scholars studied the books of sages was to use their talents to create a peaceful and prosperous world, and the channel was Great Chu. But could it really work? Lu Su was very puzzled and also very puzzled. She felt that the hot blood in her heart was gradually turning cold. When she heard that the Emperor of Great Chu sacrificed the lives of his people just to destroy the Extreme Life sect, she had already felt a deep sense of powerlessness. She knew very well that this was a matter of long-term pain rather than short-term pain. However, her thoughts prevented her from getting out of her current predicament, and she was always trapped in the same place. From the beginning to the end, Lu Su's goal was to obtain an official rank and create a Great Chu that was full of fairness and justice. But now it seemed that this would really work, or did she really need to take the exam? Lu Su walked to the bookshelf and placed the book in her hand safely inside. She then smoothed out the folds on it. Her face was covered by a white veil, so her expression could not be seen clearly. However, her beautiful eyes revealed the panic and uncertainty in her heart. Shanshan clenched her fingers into a fist and Lu Su pounded her head hard. What should I do? Chapter 182, Subai pointing at Fuin Post House. 4. The confusion in her heart increased, making her upset and at a loss. At this moment a familiar set of footsteps sounded. Lu Su turned her gaze to the staircase and saw her teacher Wang Qingfeng walking up. Greetings, teacher. Lu Su clasped her hands together and bowed as a disciple. Wang Qingfeng was holding a large pile of books in his hands. There seemed to be more than 10 books. He walked to Lu Shujin and placed the books on the ground. Lu Su didn't understand what he meant and her big eyes were filled with doubt. Paper true understanding. Wang Qingfeng said slowly, this book is even more profound than the paper book. Since you can't solve the problem by reading ordinary books, then take a look at these. As he said that, Wang Qingfeng paused for a moment before taking out another book and handing it to Lu Su. Some autobiographies made by the paper binding man might be useful to you. Lu Su looked at the book in front of her, her eyes dazed. She still remembered that when she first advanced from rank 9 to rank 8 she had also read about the paper man before she finally succeeded in breaking through. Now that her teacher had given her a book about paper figurines, she could not help but feel puzzled. Teacher, you say? Is this still considered righteous? Lu Su thought for a long time and finally decided to ask. Now her righteous spirit had long become something else. Although it was also stimulated by scholars, it always felt gloomy. Who says it isn't? Wang Qingfeng glared at him and said, have you forgotten what I taught you in the beginning? You are a scholar, you must have a firm belief in your heart. As long as you believe that you are, then you are. As long as you obtain knowledge from books, then that is your righteous spirit. At the end he added, besides, everyone in the academy knows about your situation and none of them deny it. What are you worried about? Are you not confident in yourself? When Lu Su heard this, she flipped open one of the books. After looking at it for a while, he raised his head. Teacher, don't worry, I'll stay up all night today to comprehend the principles within. Wang Qingfeng smiled and left without saying anything. Lu Su waited for her teacher to leave before bending down to pick up a book. She went to the window and began to burn the midnight oil under the moonlight. The next day, Lu Su walked out of the library early. Her mental state was already different. Usually she would feel dejected, but now every step she took was filled with confidence. Rank 6 in one night. I didn't misjudge you. Wang Qingfeng's voice came from behind. Lu Su stopped in her tracks and turned around, her face full of surprise. Teacher, you waited for me outside for the whole night? Let's go to the dining hall first. We'll talk as we walk. Wang Qingfeng did not answer Lu Su. After passing Lu Su, he led the way. Lu Su thought about it and followed behind. The two of them strolled in the Qingyun Academy. Neither of them spoke. It was very quiet. After a while, Wang Qingfeng seemed to feel that the surroundings were too quiet, so he broke the silence. Lu Su, the Great Chu country will soon hold an examination. Do you plan to take the examination? Wang Qingfeng didn't turn around and asked as he walked, as if he was talking about the past. Lu Su said in a low voice, don't plan to. I want to join the Heaven Inspectorate. Wang Qingfeng instantly stopped and turned around, his face full of surprise, recalling how Lu Su had gone from rank 8 to rank 6 overnight and the reply she had given him. Wang Qingfeng seemed to have thought of something. You? After solving the mystery in his heart, he made such a decision? Wang Qingfeng said. Lu Su raised her head and fearlessly met Wang Qingfeng's gaze. She said, Teacher, this disciple has been thinking and reading for the entire night. The books you gave me have benefited me greatly. This disciple has realized that I am not a suitable person to be an official. Wang Qingfeng fell silent and did not reply. He waited for Lu Su to continue. Lu Su tucked her black hair behind her ears and said in a voice like an oriole, This disciple's personality is more suitable for the pugilistic world. Last night she had come to a conclusion from those books. She was different from Yunzihai. The difference lay in the way they dealt with problems. Yunzihai hoped to rely on his official position to fulfill his dream, but Lu Su was very different. What Lu Su hoped for was to solve all the problems in the simplest and most direct way. In other words, she wanted to use a more forceful method. For example, when he was dealing with the young master of the Lin family, he had disguised himself as a man in black and wanted to kill him. Therefore she had already thought it through and made a decision. Wang Qingfeng looked at Lu Su's determined gaze and finally sighed. Up to you. Teaching students according to their aptitude and adapting to the local conditions had always been Wang Qingfeng's way of teaching his students. Otherwise he wouldn't have found some paper figurines for Lu Su to see. Now that his disciple had made his choice, he naturally respected it, so he did not stop him. At least in his opinion it was not a bad thing. By the way, something big happened to Su Bai, whom you told me about. Wang Qingfeng seemed to have thought of something and told him about Su Bai and King Shangyu. Of course he was the same. He only knew that Su Bai was involved in King Xingyu's incident. After Lu Su heard this, she was expressionless, as if she did not find it strange. Don't you feel weird? Wang Qingfeng asked doubtfully. Chapter 183, Su Bai pointing at Fuyin Post House. 5. If it happened to anyone else I would find it strange, but to Su Bai everything is normal. Lu Su appeared very calm. Alright, I don't want to get involved in the affairs between you young people. Let's go and eat. Wang Qingfeng didn't say anything more and left with Lu Su. Time passed unknowingly. In the blink of an eye several days had passed. The county was promoted. Su Bai sat on the chair still reading the nameless saber scripture in his hand. The progress bar of the nameless saber scripture was about to be completed. What he lacked now was just a little bit of time. During this period of time Qing Shui left, and so did Yunzihai. Before Yunzihai left, he specially went to the bodyguard agency to ask Su Bai what kind of cultivation technique he needed. Su Bai indicated that he needed 2 Tier 5 mental cultivation techniques. His attack and defense were perfect now, and what he needed the most at the moment was a mental cultivation method that could improve his true foundation. Don't forget that he was still a level 8 expert. The reason why he could suppress a rank 6 was entirely because of 3 skills. Diamond Heart, Devil Body, Shifting Stars, Kidney Strengthening Technique. In the end, his current true core strength was not enough for him to fight for a long time. In terms of explosive power he could fight. There were shortcomings but not many. However, he still needed to make up for them. Therefore 2 rank 5 mental cultivation techniques could give him a huge improvement. Looking at the time, he should be back soon. Su Bai thought to himself, his gaze never leaving the nameless saber scripture in his hand. With that thought, footsteps suddenly came from outside the door, followed by knocking on the door at the same time. Escort leader Lord Yun is here. Lu'er sent a message from outside. Su Bai's eyes lit up and he quickly asked Lu'er to bring Yunzihai in. Speaking of the devil, Yunzihai just happened to return. Outside the door, Lu'er agreed and quickly left. After a while, Yunzihai walked in from outside and pushed open the door. After entering the room impatiently, he closed the door. Brother Su, it's done. Yunzihai walked over and placed the 2 books on the table. As he spoke, he couldn't help but cough twice. The paleness on his face had not faded. congenital deficiency caused Yunzihai to still look weak and sickly. No one would believe that he was a level 6 expert. Subai picked up the 2 books and casually flipped through them. After confirming that there was a progress bar, he put them back on the table in satisfaction. A martial arts manual and a Taoist manual. But there's still a problem, Yunzihai said. We can't hide your matter. Back then, when Yunzihai asked Subai which type he needed, Subai gave him the answer. A martial arts practitioner's heart technique was a must. In terms of combat, martial arts practitioners were indeed more professional. Next was the Taoist mental cultivation method. Shifting stars and 4 steps were both skills that came from Taoism. Subai was wondering if there would be any miraculous effects if he added the Taoist mental cultivation method. He had to give it a try. With the matter of ascending the underworld king, it will be especially difficult for you to hide your identity. After all, you have already calculated your name among many people. Yunzihai explained the sequence of events. Now the entire martial world was saying that there was a young sword-wielding martial artist who participated in the resurrection of King Shengyu and even contributed greatly. In the martial world, the rate of information flow was really high. It was said that this young man was covered in black light and was very powerful. Of course, for some reason, news of Subai being chosen by King Shengyu did not spread. However, it was clear to everyone that Bale's background might not be small. After all, the emperor did not say anything after knowing about this. Sometimes not giving any indication would lead to many speculations. Hey, His Majesty actually told me that he doesn't want to get involved in his younger brother's matters. Yunzihai coughed again. But Brother Su, I think His Majesty wanted to summon you into the palace, but His Highness must have said something to him. At the mention of this, Yunzihai was amused, because when the emperor spoke to him, the expression on his face was very interesting. It was like a scholar meeting a soldier, and he was very speechless. It was said that His Majesty and the king had quarreled in the room for a long time. The precious porcelain landscape paintings and paintings in the room were all smashed by his younger brother. However, everyone in the palace knew that it was normal for the 2 of them to quarrel. When something happened, they were more united than anyone, therefore he didn't dare to say anything. Subai rubbed his chin and fell into deep thought. He did not understand what the emperor was thinking, but it was naturally a good thing that he would not be recruited into the palace. He only wanted to develop now, and too much involvement in the affairs of the Jianghu and the royal family would instead become an obstacle to him. Although there were benefits, there were also dangers. Brother Yun, have you decided on your jurisdiction? Subai asked. It's settled. It's in Yunlai Prefecture. The county is also under the jurisdiction of Yunlai Prefecture. Yunzihai explained. We'll leave tomorrow. You might have to pack up quickly. As for the Yin post house, they're ready to hand it over at any time. Tomorrow? Subai didn't expect things to progress so quickly. However, it was also a good thing that he could leave early. He could count on the progress bar elsewhere. The 2 of them chatted for a while before Yunzihai left. After all, he had to rush to a new jurisdiction soon. He had a lot of things to do and he needed to do all the work here. After Yunzihai left, Subai looked at the 3 books in his hands. He put away the 2 mental cultivation techniques and started reading the Nameless Saber scripture. In Subai's eyes, the progress bar of the Nameless Saber scripture was slowly increasing until it was finally perfected. Chapter 184, Life and Death in the Mirror World. 1. In front of Subai's eyes, the progress bar was slowly increasing. After a while, it was finally complete. Light blue smoke appeared in the air, curling and gathering into lines of words. The words turned from blurry to clear and appeared in front of Subai. A moment later, the words in front of him were completely formed and no new changes were produced. You have studied the Nameless Saber scripture and comprehended the 24 armor breaking moves. Incomplete. After this line of text appeared, Subai revealed an expression of I knew it. His guess was no different from his. In the beginning, he obtained the first Nameless Saber scripture. The top of the book once said that it was broken armor 24 styles, and the back of the book also followed a residual word. It proved that this Nameless Saber scripture was as the legend said. It had been broken into 24 parts by the Nameless Sabersman and scattered in unknown locations, which was why there was an additional word. Now it seemed that he had obtained a portion of it. Subai suddenly had a feeling of getting a set of cards. It was like a card game where he got another part of the cards. After the light blue text appeared, it began to turn blurry again, then it turned clear again and formed new content in the air. Fusion option found. Fusion in progress. Breaking first form plus armor penetration 24 forms. Incomplete. Breaking second form. Fusion successful. At this moment, the line of text finally turned into information that entered Subai's mind. It completely integrated the detailed method of the 2 styles, allowing Subai to successfully understand the true meaning within. The newest panel appeared in front of him, displaying all of Subai's current cultivation techniques. Name: Subail Realm, 8th stage unspecialized. Broken second level, level 3, maximum level. Reversal Heart Technique, Level 2.5, Maximum Level. Maple Leaves Like Rain, Tier 2 Maximum Level. 4 Steps, Level 3 Maximum Level. Shifting Stars, Level 4 Maximum Level. Diamond Heart Devil Body, Level 4, Max Level. Kidney Strengthening Technique, Level 4 Maximum Level. 100 Poison True Clear Rank 3, Full Rank. Comprehension, Max Level. The first form of breaking had become the second form of breaking, and its level had also increased from the second form to the third form. As he finished absorbing the information in his mind, Subai also understood the true essence of the technique. In short, the improvement was still very big. The first improvement was the power of armor break. Now that Subai had slashed down, the power of armor break had directly increased by 2 times. It could be said to be a huge improvement. Of course, it was not only the power of the armor piercing that had improved greatly, but also the strength of the saber technique itself. After all, it was a qualitative breakthrough from Tier 2 to Tier 3. Other than that, there was another special ability. Compared to these two abilities, it was considered a new ability, Heavily Injured. This was a very easy to understand meaning. Simply put, it was to make the other party's injuries unable to recover. The principle of its usage was simple. It was to attach true core strength to the saber, and when it was used there would be some subtle changes. When the attack landed on the opponent's body, the true core strength would remain in the opponent's body through the armor piercing method. Even if the opponent's healing ability was strong, the true core strength would still be damaged inside, which would also reduce the opponent's recovery speed. It was a very sinister characteristic, but Subai liked it very much. The more he looked at it, the more he found it pleasing to the eye. Yes. Next he would focus on these 2 books. Subai rubbed his chin and took out the 2 mental cultivation methods on the table. After careful selection, he decided to read the Taoist mental cultivation method first. The mental cultivation technique he currently possessed was called the reversal of yin and yang. The name sounded quite awesome, but its level was actually not high. More importantly, he really wanted to know if it would be closely related to the ability he used after fusing with the Taoist mental cultivation method. For example, it could increase or reduce consumption. No matter what, there was no loss in trying. What the golden finger gave him was infinite tolerance. In other words, as long as he was given time, he could learn the strengths of the various schools and fuse them into one, standing at the highest peak. Flipping through the book, a progress bar appeared in front of him. It had to be said that it was indeed worthy of being a new Tier 5 technique. This consumed quite a lot of time, however it wasn't a big problem. What he didn't lack the most was time. This Taoist mental cultivation technique was called Purple Cloud Imperial Technique. When Subai read the book carefully, he was surprised. The contents of the book and the effects it described were beyond his expectations. According to the description of the Purple Cloud Imperial Technique, the main effect of this cultivation technique was to borrow power. Using divine essence as a guide, one could borrow the power of heaven and earth. However, this book had a drawback, and that was that its level was not high. Only grade 5. The force borrowed was only about 20% at most. The consumption when using it would also be greater. However, sometimes this 20% effect could reverse the situation. Moreover, if he could really reach the 5th rank, Subai was not afraid of consumption. The energy of the double kidney could be used as a treasure trove. In terms of consumption, it was nothing. Moreover, it could increase one's strength by 20% for no reason. It was indeed not bad. Subai stroked his chin and pondered. The biggest weakness was the consumption of energy, but to him it was not a weakness at all. Let's do it. Subai immediately began to focus on the screen. In fact, he was still looking forward to it. After all, what he had was not only the Purple Heaven Imperial Technique, but also the reversal of yin and yang. Chapter 185, Life and Death in the Mirror World. 2. If he could fuse them together, who knew what changes the effects would have? Armor penetration, hallucination, courage. As the battle progressed and borrowing momentum, she was so beautiful, so beautiful. With this thought in mind, Subai became even more fascinated. Time passed, and the sun and moon rotated. In the blink of an eye, it was already nighttime. Yunlai Prefecture was located in a remote place. The people there were simple and honest, but in comparison they were still relatively backward. However, no matter what, it was still a prefecture, so it should have some land. Moreover, it ruled over many Dao City. At this moment, Wugo, the former chief of Yunlai Prefecture, was packing his things. He was preparing to leave early in the morning and take up his post elsewhere. When he left, he had to bring along a lot of his own people. After all, he had left a familiar territory and was in a new place. He could bring some familiar people with him so that he could use them. I didn't expect Yunzihai to really succeed. This matter has even set a precedent. The first residence that can govern itself and is not affected by external vision. Wugo secretly sighed as he packed his things. It was like sour grapes. After all, people were very envious of such a situation. As a 6th grade scholar, Wugo did not come from the Qingyun Academy but from another academy. That academy was not very famous, but he was able to get into the imperial examinations and reach his current status step by step. It was all thanks to his own hard work. He was also someone who had climbed up from the bottom, so of course he knew the ins and outs of it. Compared to some flowers in a greenhouse, he could see many different things. The emperor's delegation of power might not be just a promise on the surface, but there was a deeper meaning. Of course, as officials, how could they guess the heart of the Son of Heaven? He could not understand what it meant. However, there was one thing he was clear about: the handover procedure had to be smooth. He could not let anyone see anything fishy. After packing up, Wugo came to a brazier and looked at the ashes inside, revealing a satisfied smile. As the saying went, the mountains were high and the emperor was far away. A remote area like theirs had all kinds of wonderful benefits. Sometimes when one was close to the emperor, everything would be restricted. However, when one was far away, some things would naturally be extremely smooth. He didn't miss a single piece of money and he kept all the women in his hands. He was used to working here. It seemed like he had been transferred to a bustling place, but in fact it had restricted his hands and feet. Fortunately, there was nothing left out. Wugo thought. After this last matter came to an end, he felt much more relaxed. He went to the window and looked at the moonlight outside. He looked at the beautiful night sky and wondered if he had missed anything. After confirming it again and again, he was ready to close the window and rest early. He had to go through the handover procedures early tomorrow morning. Of course, he had to rest early to avoid being distracted. However, before he could close the window, he saw someone standing in the courtyard from the corner of his eye. As the moonlight was not very bright, he could not see clearly, but the sudden appearance of a person in the middle of the night immediately alerted him. A brush and a book appeared in his hands. He slowly pushed open the window. At the same time, words surrounded his entire body as he wrote. After all, he was still a 6th pin student. This bit of strength was still something he could show. Wugo was about to question the other party's identity, but he did not expect the other party to not seem to appreciate it. Without giving him a chance to ask, he raised his right hand. A cold light flashed and the surrounding temperature plummeted. Wugo only felt a chill on his neck, followed by a sharp pain. This pain was not the kind of pain that came from a sharp object cutting into one's throat, nor was it the pain of a blunt object being hit. Instead, it was the pain of ant-sized mouths constantly gnawing at the flesh on his neck. Wugo couldn't help but free his hand and grab at his neck, grabbing the thing that was flashing with a cold light. Under the moonlight, he could clearly see what was on his palm. Then all the hair on his body stood on end. It was a broken piece of a bronze mirror. In the broken piece there were ant-sized faces that were opening and closing their mouths at him. That was the source of the pain just now. Strange. Wugo's eyes widened. He did not finish his sentence because the blurry figure in the courtyard gradually became clear. The figure was in pieces, as if pieces of mirrors were pieced together. It looked extremely terrifying. When the figure became clear, it slowly lifted its feet and walked toward Wugo. With every step he took, the fragments that seemed to be pieced together on his body trembled as if they would fall off at any moment. As the mirror death approached, Wugo seemed to have thought of something. He quickly turned around and wrapped the bronze mirror in a cloth. After doing all this, he immediately turned around. With a brush and a book in his hands, he let the words appear around his body and attacked the mirror death. Boom! A series of loud noises came from the backyard and all the words were lost. When Wugo looked over, he realized that the mirror death that had just appeared had already disappeared. Gone? This situation made his heart tremble and an uneasy feeling spread throughout his body. He didn't dare to slack off at all. His hand that was holding the brush kept waving, forming characters one by one surrounding his body from top to bottom, protecting him tightly. Chapter 186, Life and Death in the Mirror World. 3. Around him a gust of cold wind blew, causing Wugo's back to feel cold. Turning his head, Wugo realized that the cloth covering the mirror had been blown off by the wind. When he turned around and subconsciously stared at the mirror, he realized that his face was reflected in the mirror. That face had a strange smile, but his eyes were cold and sinister. Wugo suddenly put down his hands, his expression extremely dull as he slowly walked in front of the mirror. The words no longer appeared on his body. The book and brush in his hand fell to the ground, but he did not feel anything. The face in the mirror still had a strange smile on it, as if it was mocking or looking at a prey. The next moment, Wugo suddenly stretched out his hand and made a strange gesture. He picked up the mirror in front of him and threw it on the ground with all his strength. The crisp sound of something breaking rang out, especially in the pitch-black night, causing one's heart to tremble. It was not just his house. The sound of mirrors shattering could be heard everywhere in the yamen where people lived. After smashing the mirror, Wugo squatted on the ground and picked up one of the fragments. At this moment, his face was no longer dull but replaced by the strange smile in the mirror. Her smile was emotionless and eerie. Wugo held the mirror fragment and slowly raised his hand. He placed the fragment on his face and gently slid it. The sliding motion was very gentle as if he was applying a layer of rouge on himself, but what was left was blood. The blood flowed along the mirror fragment, then along his hand and finally dripped down from his chin. Wugo didn't feel anything and continued to move, gentle and slow. More and more blood stains appeared on his face and some parts were so deep that the bones could be seen. In just a moment there was no place to see on his face. Wugo's smile was very cold, the flesh on his face and the blood that was flowing continuously made him look even more sinister. The direction of the mirror fragment changed and slowly landed on Wugo's neck. In the next moment Wugo slid gently and a bloody wound appeared on his neck. Immediately after, blood sprayed out. Plop! Wugo knelt on the ground with his head hanging down and his hands placed weakly on both sides. The aura of life gradually disappeared. In the blink of an eye Wugo became a corpse. The room fell silent again. The mirror death was no longer in the backyard. The next day, Subai left the Dragon Conqueror bodyguard agency with the escorts sending him off. Before he left he had already given everything to another bodyguard. That bodyguard was relative elf calm and efficient. He was complete elf competent. Among the people who followed him only Luer followed behind him. Today was the day he would head to Yunlai Mansion. He would probably rarely come back from Shang County in the future. Luer followed behind Subai. As he looked at Subai's back the admiration in his eyes increased. On the way Subai had told him everything including the place he was going to. Luer had no objections. In his mind upgrading to a county was already considered very big. The place they were going to now was Yunlai Mansion, which was 2 levels higher than Shangxian County. He didn't know how big Yunlai Mansion was, but it was definitely much bigger than Shang County. He was excited when he thought about how a person from a small county town like him would have the chance to go to Yunlai Manor. As expected, there is no problem with following the escort master. Lueri thought as he walked. Not long after the two of them arrived at the county government office, Yun Zihai was also waiting at the entrance of the county government office. He was still carrying big and small bags. He was a weak scholar with a congenital deficiency. His face was as pale as paper, but he was carrying big and small bags, giving people a very strong sense of difference. Go help him get his things. Luer was very sensible. He quickly took the package from Yun Zihai's hands. After all, he had become a 9th grade martial artist, so he still had this bit of strength. Subai had only brought money with him other than his daily necessities. He did not leave anything else behind. Brother Yin, don't you have a carriage? The surroundings were empty and there wasn't even a horse. Subai wondered if they had to walk. The carriage is outside. Yun Zihai said, it's parked at the city gate of the county town. I still have some things to do on the way, so I'm walking outside. Subai rubbed his chin. Yun Zihai did not say what he wanted to do and he did not ask. The two of them walked side by side towards the city gate. The further they went, the lower the density of the houses outside and the more dilapidated the buildings were. This was how it was. The closer it was to the center of the county, the more prosperous it was. The further away it was from the center of the county, the worse it was. When the two of them were about to reach the city gate, Subai couldn't help but frown when he didn't see any movement from Yun Zihai. At this moment Yunhai suddenly stopped and revealed a bitter smile. Subai looked in Yun Zihai's direction and realized that there was already a group of people standing at the city gate. This group of people was dressed in ordinary clothes. It could even be said that they were shabby. One look and one could tell that they were not rich. We're here to send Lord Yun off. The citizens of Shang County knelt on the ground and said in unison. Yun Zihai quickly helped the commoners up one after another, then started to nag at them. Most of the content of his nagging was about ordinary things, just reminding them to be careful. The situation only gradually turned for the time it took for an incense stick to burn. I didn't expect Brother Yin to accomplish so many things for the promotion of the county in such a short period of time, Subai said with a smile. Chapter 187, Life and Death in the Mirror World. 4. I'm only doing some things in my spare time, Yun Zihai said helplessly. I just wanted to travel in a low-key manner. I didn't want to take a carriage. I didn't expect them to find me. Outside the county town the carriage was parked undamaged. Subai walked over. When he passed by Yun Zihai he suddenly said, Brother Yun, perhaps Yunlai Prefecture is a place where you can display your talents. Yun Zihai was stunned for a moment before he smiled. This is the first time Brother Su has been so sure of me. Get in the car. Subai didn't say anything else and got into the carriage. Yun Zihai was able to win the love of the people just by spending some free time. Perhaps Yun Zihai really had that talent. What he lacked was just a platform. Yun Zihai did not say anything else. He followed behind Subai and sat in the carriage. Luer took the horsewhip from the person who sent him off and sat on the horsegroom's seat, acting as the horsegroom. Giddy up. Along with the sound, the hooves of the horses lifted and ran into the distance, kicking up a cloud of dust. The Yin Post House was the transportation hub of Great Chu. It was located in the capital. At this moment, at the new Daoyin Post House, a carriage slowly approached. This Yin Post House was much bigger than the Yin Post House in Shang County. There were many people passing by on the streets. When the carriage arrived, the post house people did not show much. They only took a glance, more or less. and did not care. Stations were meant for this kind of work, so it was normal for people to come. It would be abnormal if no one came. Yunzihai walked down from the carriage with a pale face. Subai followed behind and looked around. When he saw the posthouse that was much bigger, he could not help but sigh. Brother Su, I'll go find the station chief. Yunzihai turned around and said when they were in the carriage just now, Subai had said that he wanted to stay here and take a look, so Yunzihai did not force him. They were on a long journey. As officials, there was free food here that could be used to supplement their needs. After Yunzihai left, Subai got Luer to guard the carriage and began to stroll around the posthouse. The posthouse was indeed huge. Subai was not in a hurry. He looked at the stalls one by one. Most of the things traded here were strange. After all, they were not ordinary people. Would these things be useful? Whether there was or not depended on the specific situation. For example, there was a coffin beside the table. According to the courier who sold the coffin, once they encountered a strange thing and really couldn't defeat it, they could directly hide in it and isolate the aura of the living. It was strange. Once the aura of a living person was isolated from the body of the ship, it would be much safer. The courier spoke very strongly, but Subai also knew that the people who sold things all boasted about their goods. He was only here for the progress bar. He was not interested in anything without a progress bar. Yunzihai seemed to have been talking for a long time and had yet to come out. Subai wasn't in a hurry and just walked around. Only after the time it takes for an incense stick to burn did he finish touring the posthouse. When he walked out of the stall, he was holding a clay pot in his hand and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. There were strange and complicated patterns carved on the earthen jar, and it was impossible to distinguish the specific shape. There was nothing inside. It was empty, not even a lid. However, Subai was very happy because there was a progress bar on the pattern. I found a treasure. Subai carefully placed the jar on the carriage, his smile growing wider. At this moment, Yunzihai also walked out from where the station chief was. However, compared to Subai, Yunzihai's expression was not as happy. Instead, his face was gloomy. Even when they boarded the carriage, the cloud remained silent. Giddy up. Luer drove the carriage and continued on his way. The carriage left a trail of dust as it went further and further away. In the carriage, Subai looked at Yunzihai as he stroked the patterns on the earthen jar. What's wrong? From the moment Yunzihai entered the carriage, he had a worried look on his face. His eyebrows were knitted together and the only thing missing was the words, I have something on my mind. Even an ordinary person would be able to tell, let alone Subai. Just now Subai was still immersed in the joy of getting the progress bar. At this time he gradually calmed down, so he asked. Yunzihai was still deep in thought. After Subai asked, he came back to his senses and said apologetically, I'm sorry. Brother Su, I was still thinking about something just now, so I didn't say anything. We might have to speed up the progress. Oh? Something happened in Yunlai Mansion? Subai asked, intrigued. If there was anything that was worth catching up on, it could only be that something had happened in Yunlai Mansion. As expected, just as Subai said that, Yunzihai nodded continuously. Not only did something happen, but something big happened. Brother Su, the magistrate of Yunlai Mansion, died not long ago. What? Dead? Subai was slightly stunned. He really didn't expect the news to be so explosive. A dignified prefecture magistrate was actually dead? It seems like it was killed by the strange ones. I can't find any clues, but after the strange ones kill people, they will definitely kill again, so I have to hurry over. Yunzihai's words carried a trace of worry. Subai noticed the abnormality and frowned. The expression that Yunzihai revealed just now seemed to be quite fearful of that strange creature. Yunzihai shook his head and said, it's not very strong, but its characteristics are very strange, especially one of its characteristics. Even now there's still no way to break it. Chapter 188, Life and Death in the Mirror World. 5. Yunhai could be considered an expert in this aspect. Although Subai was famous now, he had only been in this circle for a short time. He was still unclear about many things. In particular, there was no opportunity to understand the strange thing about the boss. From beginning to end, he also encountered a few strange things. He also directly solved them with violence. Brother Su, have you heard of the mirror death? The clouds came from the sea. Subai shook his head, indicating that he had never heard of it before. However, he suddenly remembered that there was a mirror character in the name. Could it be related to mirrors? Subai asked. Originally this was just his guess. He did not expect that when he said it, Yunzihai actually nodded, indicating that it was indeed related to the mirror. The mirror death's unique characteristic is that it uses mirrors as a medium. It can appear anywhere with mirrors, and every time it appears it will be in a certain area. After the first incident, it will continue to happen in that area. Most importantly, wherever there is a mirror, as long as you look at that mirror, the mirror will show the appearance of the person who looked directly at you. The mirror death will have the level of the person who looked directly at you, and the strength of the person who looked directly at you will be reduced by half. At this point, Yunzihai roughly explained the mirror death's ability. Subai raised his eyebrows. This ability, very strong. First of all, if the mirror death had the appearance of the person who was looking straight at it, it would have the same level as the person who was looking straight at it. Just this alone was very difficult to deal with. There was something worth pondering about Yunzihai's words. The mirror death could only have the level of a direct observer but not the ability of a direct observer. In other words, this strange monster still used its own method of killing people. It would not use the ability of a direct observer to kill people. Secondly, the most fatal point was that he would directly reduce the level of the person who looked directly at him by half. If it was a level 6 expert, what would happen after cutting it in half was self-evident. You just said that it appears every time. Could it be that this is not the first time it appears? Subai asked when he noticed the strangeness in Yunzihai's words. Yes. Yunzihai nodded and said, this is its second characteristic, it can never be killed. The place where it lives belongs to the world in the mirror. No matter how many times it is killed in the outside world, it will be resurrected. Someone once tried to run into the mirror world and kill it. After that it stopped for a long time, but unexpectedly it came out again. Later I found out that as long as there is a mirror, it has countless places to revive. The carriage fell silent. Yunzihai thought of something and waved his hand repeatedly. Brother Su, I didn't ask for your help. I didn't mean anything else. I was just chatting with you. What he said was the truth. There was no trace of falsehood. After all, the current matter was already considered a matter under his jurisdiction. Most importantly, the last time he asked Subai for help, Subai was almost taken away by the female Abidine, which made Yunzihai feel very guilty. I'll go take a look. Subai said, what you said is to cover an area. The Een post house that I'm in happens to be in the Yunlai Mansions area. If the Een post house is affected, it will affect me greatly. Subai was telling the truth. If there was any danger in the place where he was collecting wool, he had to think of a way to resolve it. Otherwise he would not be able to sleep or eat in peace if he stayed here. Moreover, if the two of them worked together, they could solve the problem faster. Brother Su, I knew you were a chivalrous person. Yunzihai didn't know what to think, but he was immediately moved. As expected, junior sister Lu didn't misjudge you. He said that you have a sense of justice that is hard to detect. Subai was speechless. He didn't know if he should say thank you or say something to alleviate the special situation. If he was given a second chance, or if Lu Su was standing in front of him, he would definitely press down on Lu Su's shoulders, lean in front of her ears and roar at the loudest volume, "Don't praise me so well." Even with Subai's facial skills, he still felt that it was not very good to praise him like this. Outside the carriage, Luer was still driving the carriage. The two people in the carriage were having a close conversation. After talking for about half an incense stick's time, Subai and Yunzihai gradually felt that something was wrong. The carriage seems to have slowed down and it's getting slower and slower. Subai frowned and shouted, "Luer, are you asleep?" Luer heard the sound and stopped the carriage. Then he lifted the curtain of the carriage and carefully put his head into the carriage. "Sir, something happened outside." His voice was trembling, showing that Luer's heart was very unstable. Subai's gaze passed Luer and followed the gap in the curtain that Luer had lifted, looking outside. When he saw the situation outside, his eyes widened slightly, then he gripped Ghost Headblade. "Brother Yun, it looks like this last trip is going to be bumpy." Chapter 189, Basic Operation. Everyone seats alter new balsa tmsy on Lionel also look out a druzen anu adoke. 1201 them looked at each other and then walked out of the carriage. Outside the carriage it was a boundless night. As Subayun and Zihai were sitting inside the carriage, they did not know that the carriage was currently traveling in a dense forest. It just so happened to stop and was surrounded by towering trees. Due to the tree leaves blocking the light, the moon shone sparsely on the ground, creating a mottled shadow. There was no one around. It was quiet. Other than the occasional chirping of insects and birds, there was no other sound. If someone passed by, the timid would even feel a chill run down their spine. Other than the quiet night and the occasional sounds around them, abnormal things were happening in the pitch-black sky. The weather was very good at this time. Although the night was a little cold, wearing 2 layers of unlined clothes was enough to keep them warm. If the moon was a little rounder today, it would be the best time to admire the moon with 2 pots of old wine and some side dishes. Moon appreciation was a common activity in Great Chu. Be it the elegant scholars or the ordinary people, they all liked to admire the moon. However, other than the bright moon, there was also something yellow floating in the sky. Under the influence of gravity, these orange objects fell from a high place and slowly landed on the ground. The edges were round, the middle had holes, and the paper money was shocking. The paper money was spread on the ground, densely packed. There were still paper money in the sky, falling with the wind. Such a thing happening out of nowhere would feel strange no matter where it was. Brother Su, I once heard a folk story about this moment. Yunzihai looked up at the sky and slowly told him everything he knew. To sum it up, there was only one sentence: if paper money falls from the sky, there must be a great disaster. Paper money was used to pay tribute to the dead. it was the most widely used during the memorial ceremony. The Yang realm had the currency of the Yang realm and the Netherworld had the paper money of the Netherworld. The two did not conflict with each other. Many times it was a custom to pay homage to their deceased ancestors at a specific time and use paper money to express their respect. However, customs were customs. If they encountered such a situation on a normal day, even the most normal customs would become terrifying for no reason. It was said that in an unknown county there was once a scholar who had been studying hard in his courtyard after failing the examination. He planned to continue to take the examination next year. Coincidentally, it was time for the memorial ceremony. The scholar was more concerned about these rules, so he bought some paper money and went to the wilderness to pay homage to his deceased ancestors. On the way back, it happened to be raining heavily and they happened to encounter an uninhabited, dilapidated temple. The scholar took shelter from the rain in the temple. After the rain gradually became lighter and disappeared, he continued to rush home. However, he did not expect that the rain would only gradually stop in the middle of the night. The scholar could only take advantage of the moonlight and rush home. They were halfway through the journey, but unexpectedly when they passed by a small road, something strange happened. On the small road, paper money suddenly appeared one after another. They were densely naked and covered the entire road. He didn't know what happened that day, but the next day he found the scholar's body on that path. From then on there was a legend that had been circulating among the people for a long time. The road paved with paper money was the road to giving money, and this so-called giving money was giving money from the dark. Through this path the paper money could be delivered to the hands that needed it. Once a person took this path, they would enter the world of the dead. If he encountered such a situation when he returned home at night, he had to immediately turn around and find a place to stay along the path he had taken. He could only go back when dawn came. When the living meet the dark road, turn around and don't look back. Hearing Yun Zihai's story, Subai rubbed his chin thoughtfully. The paper money on the ground was densely packed. Coupled with the eerie trees on both sides and the moonlight, it gave people a feeling of coldness and terror. Turn around? Subai said. Yun Zihai shook his head and said, what I'm talking about is indeed a legend that has been circulating among the people for a long time. However, this legend has its roots and is not groundless. In other words, the scholar really encountered this situation and died? Subai asked. The folk version was naturally different from the official version. The official news was definitely more reliable. Now that he heard what Yun Zihai said, Subai guessed that there was indeed something strange happening, but it was not some so-called shady road. That's the mirror world. After the mirror death was born, the mirror world appeared, Yun Zihai said seriously. That scholar walked along this path and entered the mirror world. He died there. What? Subai's interest was instantly piqued. In other words, we might encounter the strange thing that killed the prefecture token? He did not expect to meet the mirror death so soon. He had thought that he would deal with him in Yunlai Mansion. Turning back is useless. From the moment I set foot on this path there is no way out. I can only keep walking forward and see the essence of it. The clouds came from the sea. The two of them discussed for a while before getting off the carriage. Luer was confused. In the end he followed Subai. At the same time he pulled out the long saber at his waist and was on guard against the dark environment around him. Chapter 190, Basic Operation. Everyone seats. 2. He panicked, especially when he saw the paper money all over the ground. Subai and Yun Zihai were both veterans of the battlefield and Luer was only a 9th grade martial artist. He had not encountered the situation before him, so it was normal for him to panic. As soon as he came down and stood on the paper money on the ground, Subai felt different. It was as if he was stepping on soft mud. A gust of cold wind blew over. Subai followed the path and looked forward. At the end of the road it was pitch black and blurry. He couldn't see the specific situation clearly. Brother Yun, what was the method used by the person who broke into the mirror world and killed the strange creature? Subai asked as he walked. Yun Zihai stared into the distance solemnly. When he heard Subai's voice he turned his head. As far as I know, the mirror death can only replicate a person's strength but not their ability. That person was a 9th grade martial artist. He brought a weapon that was good at attacking and directly broke in. He used the weapon to kill the mirror death. I see. No wonder you're not anxious at all. Subai suddenly understood. It seems like there's something special. Thinking about it this way, the mirror death's loophole was quite big. He could only replicate strength, not abilities. This included weapons and all kinds of treasures. Yes, Yun Zihai said, I reckon that the prefecture commander who was killed was very likely to have been ambushed. Moreover, to put it bluntly, that prefecture commander might not have any treasures. Before he came, Yun Zihai had already understood everything in the Yin post house. The prefect of Yunlai Mansion had climbed up from the bottom. His birth was indeed incomparable to that of the Qingyun Academy. The academy that the prefect was in was also ordinary in the Nanhua Road, or even very poor. If that was the case, it was really possible that he would die at the hands of the mirror death. Subai stopped talking and focused on moving forward. He had no treasures, however he had the ability. The mirror death could duplicate a person's grade, but it was useless against him. At most he would have the strength of a rank 8 and the mirror death would be able to copy him. As for what happened after that, he could only press him on the ground with one hand. The true essence energy that the kidney strengthening technique carried was a full 6th stage. There were also so many tier 4 skills. Any one of them would not be enough for him to fight, in fact compared to the fact that he was rubbing the dead man on the ground, he was more curious about something else. All of this was too much of a coincidence. Why did they suddenly encounter the mirror death on their way here? Moreover, the prefecture master had been killed by the mirror death earlier. Subai thought about it carefully. He felt like a net was coming at them. However, all of this could be put aside for the time being. He could talk about it again after he dealt with the thing in front of him. The two of them walked faster and faster, and the paper money on the ground became thicker and thicker. The only one who was nervous was Lu Er. After all, it was his first time experiencing such things. It would be a lie to say that he was not nervous. The road ahead was dark. As they walked, a light suddenly appeared in the darkness. Subai pulled out his ghost head blade and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. As they got closer, the light became brighter and brighter. When they got closer, they realized that it was a huge mirror. The mirror was 3 meters tall and 3 meters wide. It was placed in the middle, making it look unusually abrupt. The moonlight in the sky shone on the mirror and the light reflected was slightly eye-catching. However, the thing in the mirror was very abnormal. 3 people were reflected in the mirror. Of course they were Subai and the other 2. However, their expressions in the mirror were different from their original expressions. In the mirror they had strange smiles on their faces. It was as if they were mocking the people outside the mirror. Subai glanced at him, asking how to get in. You can enter with your back facing the mirror. Yun Zihai turned around and maintained his back facing him. This was also discovered by the person who went in that day. It was considered a coincidence. As for the principle, I don't know either. As he spoke, countless words rose from Yun Zihai's body and wrapped around his entire body. Subai rubbed his chin and turned around as well. The black light on his body covered his entire body. Lu Er was speechless. So these two have ways to protect their backs, but I don't. Of course, Lu Er still turned around and put his long saber behind him as protection. He wasn't a fool. He knew that it was more dangerous to stay outside alone. He might as well go in with Subai. Besides, he was determined to become Subai's lackey. Subai retreated with his back facing the mirror. When he touched the mirror, he felt something wrapped around him and a faint suction force. He didn't resist and fell into the suction force. Clouds and mist-like objects appeared in front of him, blocking his vision. He didn't feel like he was in the air and he still stepped on flat ground. When the clouds dispersed, Subai found that he was still in the dark forest. Soon Yun Zihai and Lu Er also walked in, like Subai. They looked at the surrounding darkness. This is already the mirror world. What we need to do is to lure it out. As for how to lure it out, we have to destroy it, Yun Zihai said in a familiar manner. Every mirror world is only located in the place where the mirror shines. The mirror just now was very large, but it was only limited to that forest. In the mirror world, every piece was connected to each other, but if it existed alone, it would only be in the position where it was illuminated. Chapter 191, Basic Operation. Everyone sit. 3. Destruction was the simplest and most direct method, Yun Zihai explained patiently. Otherwise, how could they say that they came from a famous family? The teaching of the Green Cloud Academy in this aspect was still very perfect. At least it gave them a lot of knowledge. If Yunlai Manor's manor token had these things, he wouldn't have died tragically there. I'm familiar with this, Subai said with a smile as he gripped Ghost Headblade. As soon as he finished speaking, Subai reached into his money pouch and threw out a handful of copper coins which were wrapped in black light. The copper coins were like rain dense and airtight. The copper coins that had been enhanced by the black light no longer had the characteristics of hidden weapons. Each of them was powerful enough to sweep through the forest in front of them, leaving only a pile of debris. Brother Suyur Maple leaves are like rain, much taller than the Yun families. When Yun Zihai was chased out, he was still a member of the Yun family. Of course he knew this unique skill. However, when he changed his profession to a scholar, he had already forgotten this unique skill. When he saw Subai make his move, the other party did not fall behind either. Words rose into the air and swept in all directions. In an instant the forest was moving at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was constantly being destroyed. It's another day of hugging a thigh. He was a 9th grade martial artist and did not have much destructive power. He could only go close combat to cut trees, but now it seemed that he did not need to go at all. In the blink of an eye the surroundings had become barren. At this moment Subai also discovered something different about his surroundings. Logically speaking, after the forest was destroyed it should have become wider. However, the mirror world was different. There were invisible mirrors around them that shone on them. At this moment Subai felt that something was wrong. His strength was constantly weakening. In the blink of an eye it had already been weakened by half. The characteristics of the mirror death are more like rules, Subai thought to himself. As he thought of this, his surroundings changed. In front of Subai at the end of the road a figure was approaching them. A cold wind blew around them. As the figure approached, the cold wind blew stronger and stronger. When Subai saw the mirror death, his mouth twitched. He turned his head and stared at Yun Zihai. "You didn't tell me about this characteristic." "Brother Su, this is the first time I'm seeing this. Perhaps after so many years it has evolved." Yun Zihai was speechless. Not far away the figure gradually became clearer and revealed its true appearance. 3 heads, 6 arms and 6 legs. The 3 heads looked like Subai, Yun Zihai and Lu Er. However, each head had a smile on it. The smile was terrifying. It was as if the mirror death had merged the 3 of them into one, and it became strange. "Brother Su, I'll use the brush to kill him." Later, Yun Zihai raised the brush in his hand and said, "This brush was naturally from the Green Cloud Academy. In the Green Cloud Academy he was also considered a favored son of heaven. It was very normal for him to obtain a treasure just like Lu Su." Yun Zihai knew very well that the mirror death situation was special. The moment he walked into the mirror world his strength had already been reduced by half. Now Subai was probably in the same situation as him, so he could only rely on the brush in his hand to deal with him. "Why do I feel like the mirror death is stronger than you?" Subai stroked his chin and said. This sentence did not have any negative meaning. Instead it was a statement of fact. The mirror death in front of him was around rank 6, but he was much stronger than an average rank 6. When Subai said this, the mirror death changed again. The head that looked like Lu Er disappeared and the mirror death's strength increased a little. "It's fusing?" Yun Zihai saw the signs and said in surprise, "It seems that you don't know much about the mirror dead." Subai said, "Entering the mirror world at the same time will only make it stronger. It can even fuse with the mirror world. This is not a good sign. The more people that came in, the stronger they would be. If a large group of people really came in, wouldn't the mirror death's strength increase infinitely?" However, it seemed that the merging of the two meant that it would take time. Thinking of this, Subai took a step forward and used the kidney strengthening technique. The true core strength in his kidneys flowed backward. Then he was enveloped in a black light and crashed into the mirror death. The next moment the mirror death turned into ashes. Yun Zihai was speechless. He lowered his head and looked at the brush in his hand. He felt particularly speechless and helpless. "To be honest, brother Su, are you one of those old monsters who used a special method to reincarnate into a human?" Although this sentence was meant to be a joke, Yun Zihai started to believe it as he spoke. He sized Subai up with suspicion. He knew that Subai had a technique that was beyond his current level. However, now that he had entered this mirror world, Subai's strength had been weakened by half. Would he be able to use such a technique that was beyond his level? He had been certain that Subai would not be able to do it, but now it seemed that he was wrong. He could still use a technique that surpassed his current level even though his strength had been reduced by half. Moreover, he was not weakened at all. Even Yun Zihai, a talented disciple of the Qingyun Academy, was envious of such an ability. Yun Zihai looked at the brush in his hand and suddenly felt that it was not fragrant anymore. "Mighty escort leader." Lu Er flattered. Subai coughed and said, "It's just a basic operation, don't be surprised." Yun Zihai replied, "Ko." Chapter 192, Basic Operation. Everyone seats. If this could be called a basic move, then there were really not many people in the world who could do it. It was too uncomfortable. As they chatted, the surrounding scenery gradually changed as the mirror death died. Not far away, cracks began to appear on the mirror-like barrier, then it was densely covered like a spider web. The surroundings quickly turned into fragments and fell to the ground. When the mirror fell to the ground and shattered, everything around them disappeared and they returned to the forest. The paper money on the ground was also gone. This time they had truly returned to reality and were no longer in the mirror world. "Brother Su, let's hurry along." Yun Zihai collected his chaotic thoughts and said, "The mirror death is gone. It'll be a long time before it appears again." However, before he could finish his sentence, he saw Subai lowering his head in deep thought. He didn't say anything, as if he was thinking about something. The surroundings were very quiet. Only Yun Zihai's voice could be heard. Lu Er stood respectfully at the side and did not disturb Subai's thoughts. He seemed very sensible. "Brother Su, what's wrong?" Yun Zihai was slightly puzzled as he asked. Now that the mirror death had been dealt with, he could set off for Yunlai Mansion. He did not understand why Subai was thinking about something here. Subai slowly came back to his senses from his deep thoughts. He raised his head and glanced at Yun Zihai before sweeping his gaze towards the surrounding forest. "Don't you think that this is a premeditated ambush?" He had been thinking about this question just now. Why did they encounter the strangeness of killing the former prefecture master on their way to Yunlai Prefecture? It was normal to meet him in Yunlai Mansion, but it was a bit abnormal to meet him on the road. It was too much of a coincidence. Sometimes too much coincidence could be a problem. the more coincidental it was, the more trouble there would be. Are you saying that the strangeness was deliberately attracted by someone? Yun Zihai was stunned for a moment before shaking his head. I can be strange. I have no consciousness from beginning to end. I have no ability to control. I have no ability to arrange. I have no ability to arrange. I have no ability to arrange. I have no ability to control. I have no ability to arrange. I have no ability to control. 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 I have no ability to arrange. I have no ability to control. 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 It was strange and cruel. It had an inexplicable hatred for living people. Moreover, it did not have the consciousness of a living person. It was completely chaotic and no one could control it. If he really wanted to deal with them, how could he have arranged them precisely on this path? Yun Zihai felt slightly puzzled. What if we install mirrors all around? You mentioned before that the mirror death comes out of the mirror to harm people, Subai said. Then if there are many mirrors in one place, will the probability of triggering it be higher? Yun Zihai was stunned, then he suddenly turned his head and looked around. He raised the brush in his hand and wrote in the air. One after another as he wrote, the words appeared in the air and then crushed in all directions, bringing with them a whistling sound. In the blink of an eye the surrounding trees collapsed, revealing the truth behind the forest. Under the moonlight the glistening mirrors reflected a weak glow. This path was filled with mirrors and there were dozens of them. Each mirror was more than 3 meters tall. Due to the dense forest and the fact that they were not discovered in the carriage, they basically walked along this path with mirrors. Now that things had come to this, Yun Zihai finally understood why they had inexplicably met the mirror death. I think we must continue to speed up the progress. Yun Zihai waved his brush and shattered all the mirrors before saying, there was no way to control the strangeness, but it could increase the probability of the strangeness appearing and the probability of its location. This was a little tricky. From all the known clues there seemed to be a net that had caught them. Brother Yun, it seems that you have offended many people in the past, Subai teased. Yun Zihai was the first to board the carriage and said, LF, you want to stop me from going to the Yunlai mansion? Then I will definitely be the mansion token. I want to see who dares to stir up trouble in my place. Subai also got on the carriage and sat in the corner of the carriage. He stroked the earthen jar he had obtained in the inn post house. Luo drive the carriage. Yes, sir. Luer sat in the carriage and drove the horse towards Yunlai mansion. The carriage sped up, kicking up a cloud of dust as it drove further and further away. The next day, Yunlai Manor. A carriage sped past and arrived at the government office. There were 2 bailiffs guarding the entrance of the government office. When they saw the carriage they looked at each other, then one of them walked up and was about to speak, but before he could say anything Luer glared at him. The new residence order has arrived, retreat. This sentence was spoken so abruptly that the bailiffs who had rushed over were also shocked. They recalled the contents of the sentence and quickly retreated. New prefecture order? The bailiff was very respectful. After all, he was a police officer in the government office. Who didn't know? It was said that the new magistrate was highly regarded by the emperor and was the first magistrate to implement autonomy. This was incredible. They did not dare to offend the person who had set the precedent. However, he was still very curious. One of the bailiffs secretly raised his head and sized him up. Not long after, a scholarly-looking person alighted from the carriage. His face was pale and he coughed when he alighted. Greetings, Lord Prefect. The bailiffs hurriedly bowed their heads. Yun Zihai waved his hand and got them to stand up. The bailiffs were getting more and more curious about the country. This new major looked very weak and his scholarly aura grew stronger with the addition of his weak body. Chapter 193. Basic operation. Everyone seats. However, judging a book by its cover wasn't a good thing these days, so everyone knew that some people looked gentle but they were actually very fierce on the inside. The bailiff thought that he could bring the new lord in immediately, but he did not expect the new lord to turn around and shout at the carriage, Brother Su, I've never seen you like pottery so much. I don't see anything good about it. If you like it, I'll give you a lot. There was someone else? The 2 bailiffs were stunned. Not long after, a handsome young man carrying a clay pot alighted from the carriage. This young man was extremely handsome. He had a ghost head blade at his waist and there was an inexplicable murderous aura about him. The 2 bailiffs shivered and did not dare to raise their heads to look at the young man. Subai held the earthen jar and sized up the 2 bailiffs. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly.
As expected of Yunlai Manor, the two bailiffs guarding the door are both ranked. This government office was much more brilliant than the county office, just the two bailiffs guarding the door were already ranked. I wouldn't dare, Darren is the true expert. A bailiff rolled his eyes and said, things in officialdom naturally had to be done with some skill. This bootlicking was very smooth. Luer's eyes widened as he felt the impact. In this day and age even flattery had to be snatched from him? Indeed, every industry was very competitive. Look, even in the industry of flattery one had to show some competitiveness, otherwise who knew when others would take the lead? Thinking of this, Luer quickly took a learning attitude and memorized the scene just now. Jun Zihai waved his hand and said, no need to be so polite, bring me in to see Lord Wu's situation. The bailiffs looked at each other. They knew that this new lord had come to do something practical, so they did not dare to say anything more. They quickly opened the door and led Yun Zihai and the others in. There were many more government offices than the county offices. When Subai walked in, he didn't see many people. After the explanation of the bailiffs along the way, he finally understood that this time it wasn't just a magistrate who died, including the family members of the magistrate as well as the people who were on duty at the government office that night. They were all dead. This matter was quite sensational, and it was also widely spread in Yunlai Manor. The commoners were also aware of it. As they were in the carriage, they didn't have time to observe the unusual behavior of the people. The bailiff brought Yun Zihai to the side of the prison cell and said, the corpses from that day are here. Fortunately, the weather has turned cold, so we have used a special method to preserve the corpses. In front of them was a relatively large house. The door was tightly shut, and when they approached the house there was a cold aura. Yun Zihai came to the door and pushed it open. A voice came from inside. Didn't I tell you? Don't disturb me when I come here to do things every day. This voice carried a hint of dissatisfaction. Subai looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young man in ordinary clothes sitting in the middle. Around them were more than a dozen corpses. The young man's body was covered in a layer of white frost. The cold aura was transmitted to the corpse through the white frost, allowing the corpse to maintain a low temperature and not rot. Sir, this is the coroner. The bailiff explained. Subai didn't understand what a coroner was, but the word coroner at the end of the sentence indicated that it was a special profession. Jun Zihai knew this very well. He did not answer and walked towards the pile of corpses. When the young man heard that the bailiff had called him Lord, he understood what was going on. He quickly stood up and bowed. Zheng Jin greets Lord Prefect. Yun Zihai nodded and was about to say something. Unexpectedly, Zhang Jin reacted very quickly. He took out a notebook from his bag and handed it to Yun Zihai. Sir, this is the autopsy report that I have done recently. Please take a look. When Yun Zihai saw what he wanted, he didn't say much and took it. You guys go down first. I want to take a look. Yes, sir. Zheng Jin and the other two bailiffs knew what was going on. They quickly said that and prepared to leave. Before he left, Zheng Jin glanced at Subai. When he saw the ghost head blade at Subai's waist, he quickly turned his head and left. Subai winked at Luer. Luer was very sensible. He also turned around and left. When everyone had left, Subai walked over and sized up Yun Zihai. Brother Yun, it seems like this matter is quite troublesome. The surrounding corpses were emitting cold air. As Subai spoke, he closed the door. After the door was closed, the light dimmed slightly and the room looked very gloomy. Jun Zihai came to a corpse and casually threw the autopsy report in his hand on it. He said, the biggest problem is that there are no clues. With the aptitude of a scholar, he finished reading the autopsy report in a short period of time. After reading it, he felt that it was boring, it was useless, it was just some ordinary records. Other than knowing that he died in the mirror, there were no other clues. These were not the most important things. The most important thing was that after Yun Zihai came to Yunlai Mansion, he encountered a very troublesome matter that was extremely difficult to deal with. Chapter 194, Yunlai Manor is ours. 1. The most important thing for him right now, and also the thing he lacked the most, was people. Other things were also lacking, but it was not that serious. Only people were the most important. When they first arrived at Yunlai Mansion, there were only 2 or 3 of them left in the entire government office. There were less than 10 people in total. There was no way to use them at ease. Is there a plan? Subai said. Jun Zihai shook his head and said, Brother Su, the 2 of us will keep in close contact. You should go to the Yin post house first. We can't both lose our composure. Once I find any useful clues, I'll inform you in time. Looks like you really want to drag me down with you. Subai laughed. If it was before, I definitely wouldn't do this, but now I don't have anyone I can trust. Yun Zihai turned his head and said, Brother Su, you will help me, right? Helping you is helping me. Subai continued to smile. There was no free lunch in this world, and there was no free help. Yun Zihai naturally understood this logic and nodded repeatedly in agreement. In the future, if Brother Su needs anything in Yunlai Prefecture, I will do my best. Subai nodded. Alright, I'll help you with this.
The person in charge of Yunlai Manor was Yunzihai, so it was necessary to have a good relationship with him. Subai still hoped to have more progress bars here, so he naturally needed them. In the future he was in charge of the Yin Post House and the Yunzihai, he was in charge of the Yunlai Mansion, the traffic and the mansion were all occupied. This meant that in the future the two of them would have the final say in Yunlai Manor. If that's the case, I'll go to the Yin Post House first. Inform me if you make any movements and I'll come over to help you, Subai said. The Yin Post House was his main goal. He had to rush over and take a look. Wait, brother Su. Yunzihai raised his hand to stop Subai and said, before you go, I still have something to ask of you. It's an especially important matter. Subai waved his hand and put on a forthright look. Bring it up, just don't go too far. Yunzihai was speechless. When he saw Subai's particularly forthright action, he thought that he was asking him to mention it casually. In the end he said that it was fine as long as he didn't go too far. He felt helpless. Of course he had been with Subai for a long time, so he naturally knew what kind of personality Subai had, so he didn't take it seriously. I want to borrow Luer from brother Su. Yunzihai pointed at Luer. I'm indeed short of manpower here and I don't trust these people. Just take this autopsy report as an example. There are many things that are worth pondering. For example, many details have been omitted. It's obvious that he's just waiting to die. Borrowing people was also a helpless move. Yunzihai only suggested this idea because he really had no other choice. After all, he really did not have anyone he could trust right now. Subai raised his eyebrows and looked at Luer. Sure. Of course Luer did not object at all. He bent down and said, I'll listen to your orders. In his opinion, the escort master and Lord Yun had a good relationship. As a sensible person, he naturally knew what he should and should not do. Thank you, brother Su. Lu Yun thanked him by C. Subai waved his hand and said, alright, since that's the case, let's do as we discussed. When the time comes, give me a message. I'll return to the Yin Post House first. Yunzihai nodded, indicating that there was no problem. After the matter here was settled, Subai did not stay any longer. He left Luer in the government office and left for the Yin Post House. The Yin Post House of Yunlai Prefecture was also located in a remote wilderness. After all, it was a post house that could only be used by special people. It was easy to expose the open side of the place. Before he left, Yunzihai gave him his appointment letter and the map to the Yin Post House. Subai followed the map and hurried along the way. Nothing strange happened along the way, which made Subai a little disappointed. The more he attacked, the more flaws he had. He was now hoping that the other party would casually attack a few times so that he could find the flaws and find out the true culprit behind it. Unfortunately, the enemy hiding in the dark was obviously not easy to deal with. They knew that if they attacked casually, they might leave behind clues that would assist them, so they did not choose to ambush Subai in the dark. The journey was indeed very long. He did not ride a horse and only relied on his legs to travel. It took him nearly 2 hours to arrive at the Yin Post House. This Yin Post House was the largest Yin Post House Subai had ever seen. Standing at the entrance, he could see the vast area and the many people who were waiting in front of the stalls. Not only were there many stalls, but there were also many residences. These houses were built very simply, but from the structure they looked unusually sturdy. It was obvious that they could accommodate people who came and went. Among them, the most eye-catching house had a slightly better appearance and was easier to recognize. Subai's arrival attracted the attention of many posthouse workers. Some of them exchanged glances with each other before lowering their heads to look after their stalls. They were clearly not very interested. In front of the largest house, a middle-aged man dressed in gray stood. At the door, he held an account book in his hand as if he was recording something. Subai walked over and his gaze stopped at the middle-aged man's waist. There was a sign hanging there, a sign that belonged to the station chief. Presumably this was the chief of the Yin Post House in Yunlai Prefecture, the person he was going to take over. The middle-aged man seemed to have sensed someone approaching. He stopped his bookkeeping and looked up at the direction of the footsteps. When he saw Subai, he was clearly stunned. However, when he turned his gaze and saw the ghost head blade at Subai's waist, he quickly reacted. Chapter 195, Yunlai Mansion is ours, too. These people were very well informed. Just by identifying the ghost head blade on Subai's waist, they already knew who he was. So Lord Su was here. The middle-aged man put away the account book in his hand. When Subai approached, he cupped his hands and greeted him with a smile on his face. Lord Su? This was the first time someone called him that. Needless to say, it sounded pretty good. Subai rubbed his chin and sized up the middle-aged man. May I ask how I should address you? Oh. Oizheng smiled and said his name. He looked around and quickly brought Subai into the house. This isn't the place for the handover, let's talk inside. When he walked, his footsteps were steady, his movements were crisp, and he had an imposing aura, a master of the flow. Subai thought to himself. The door at the back was pushed open by the postmaster. The facilities inside were very simple, but they were all perfect. whether it was tables, chairs, or tea sets, everything was inside. There was everything there should be, even the kitchen. This book has already recorded the various rules of the posthouse as well as the approximate location of the layout and the surrounding buildings. Posthouse Chief O handed over the account book and placed it on the table. Subai had thought that this was an account book, but he didn't expect it to be a book. Obviously, Posthouse Chief O planned to use the simplest method to hand it over. The simplest method was to give you a book and let you read it yourself. Subai shifted his gaze to the table and stared at the book on it. He smiled. Posthouse Chief O, I feel that there are some things that I need you to explain to me, otherwise I won't be able to understand them. Posthouse Chief O was originally prepared to turn around and pack his things. He didn't expect that after hearing Subai's words his brows slightly furrowed. He walked closer and flipped open one of the pages, pointing at the words on it. Lord Su, every line is written clearly, you only need to read it. I also need to leave immediately to take up my post at the next relay station, there's no other way. His words were reasonable and did not offend Subai in any way. Subai's lips curled up. He took out a small porcelain bottle from the bag at his waist and poured out a pill from the porcelain bottle, putting it into his mouth. After doing this, he picked up the book on the table and flipped to the first page. Not bad, not bad. It's written in great detail. You didn't even miss a single detail. It seems like Lord O spent a lot of time on this book. In my opinion, what is written on it is true. After all, to find a way to let me read it, the slow poison will take a long time to activate. There was no problem with the first two sentences, but when he said the last sentence, the expression in his eyes changed. Lord Su, what do you mean? I really don't understand. I painstakingly wrote this book so that you can take over. You're simply slandering me. Esteemed Out's face and neck turned red as he made an extremely angry expression. He pointed at Subai and berated him. Subai didn't move. He lifted the book and turned the page down, then he shook it hard. As he shook, a lot of powder floated out of the book, which was especially obvious in the air. The food poison is a 7th grade poison, but its power is comparable to that of a 6th grade poison. The reason is that this poison is slow. It will gradually corrode a person's blood over time and eventually die of unknown causes. Subai said lightly, I can see that your complexion is ruddy. It's obviously not your original skin color. It's the result of the poison entering your body and the antidote relieving it. Poison? Sorry, he was also an expert in using poison. The 100 Poison Sutra was a 7th grade poison scripture, and there were many poison techniques recorded on it. Moreover, there was also the 100 Violent Poison, a poison that could even poison a rank 6 expert. Using poison techniques in front of him was simply showing off in front of an expert. Why don't you try this? Subai pulled out the ghost head blade and placed it on the table. The blade was covered in 100 violent poison and a dangerous light flickered on it. The expression of the Postmaster O turned from red to black, becoming extremely ugly. He knew that the other party had already discovered him, but there was no time to think about the current situation. He hurriedly turned around, wanting to break through the window and escape. Subai took a step forward and used the 4-movement technique. He took the lead and blocked the middle. LF, you tell me, I'll give you a quick death. If you don't tell me, I guarantee you'll tell me you're courting death. Posthouse Chief O roared in rage. He then crossed his palms and slapped them towards Subai's head. A faint green light appeared on his palm, giving off a strange feeling. Subai circulated his true core strength and used the Vajra Heart Devil body. A faint layer of black light rose from his body. When Posthouse Chief Out's hand landed on the black light, Subai immediately used stellar transposition. The hand that was covered in green light suddenly turned around and slapped on the chest of Posthouse Chief O, sending him flying. Puff! Posthouse Chief O fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared at Subai with a face full of anger. You actually dared to attack an official of the Imperial Court and openly oppose the Great Chu country. Once others find out, they will definitely punish you with the death penalty. This sentence was said in a very serious manner, as if it had really happened. Subai stroked his chin and said, It seems like you've already thought of a backup plan. Once your plan of using poison fails, you'll attack me forcefully. If your attack fails, you'll use this trick to frame me. That's very good. Chapter 196, Yunlai Manor is ours. 3, Then do you dare to kill me? Under the watchful eyes of the public, the posthouse guards are outside. If I can't get out alive, think about what the rumors will spread about you. Will His Majesty let you off? When he said this, besides mockery, there was also a trace of pride in his tone. It was as if he felt very comfortable watching Subai suffer. He was certain that Subai wouldn't dare to kill him, because he was still in the posthouse. If he couldn't get out of here alive, the posthouse people outside would definitely start to make unnecessary guesses. If word got out, not only would Subai lose his position, but it would also attract even more trouble. After all, according to the laws of the Great Chu state, killing an official of the Imperial Court would definitely be severely punished. Thinking of this, Owen Posthouse couldn't help but praise her own intelligence. I dare, Subai said indifferently.
what did you say?
Posthouse Chief O was stunned. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Subai raise his ghost head blade and slash at him. His limbs were broken and blood spurted out quickly, dirtying the floor. Subai used the medicine he got from Ching Shui to stop the bleeding on Oyi's limbs. Then he quickly raised his foot and stepped on Oyi's mouth, making him unable to make a sound. Posthouse Chief O's face was filled with fear. He couldn't understand why the other party was so decisive. Why did he
dare? Aren't you afraid of the laws of Great Chu? Why? Are you really not afraid?
At this moment, although his limbs were aching, he could not suppress the shock in his heart. I don't have to worry about you framing me. As long as Yun Zihai believes me, it's fine.
Subai said with a smile. What was this place? Yunlai Manor. Who is in charge of Yunlai Mansion? Yun Zihai is in charge. Who is in charge of the Yin Post House? It was Subai. Counting them one after another, it was equivalent to the two of them occupying the entire Yunlai Mansion. Afraid?
There was nothing to be afraid of. Come on, tell me. I want everything you know. Subai took out the pill he got from Ching Shui and said with a smile, let me remind you, eating this thing is very painful. Posthouse Chief O stared at Subai. When he saw the medicine bottle in Subai's hand, he suddenly smiled. Subai frowned and a bad thought appeared in his mind. Just as this thought formed in his mind, he saw a change in Posthouse Commander O. From the top of his head, layers of blood mist spread out. Within the blood mist, he turned into a puddle of blood. Corpse rotting poison? Subai took 2 steps back and waved his sleeves to disperse the blood mist in front of him. This was also recorded in the true solution of the 100 poisons. It was an extremely painful poison. After eating it, it would turn into blood in less than a moment. To actually be willing to eat such a painful poison and not reveal the secret behind it, it seems that the waters of Yunlai Manor run deep. Subai thought. Since things had come to this, there was nothing more to say. Subai found a broom, cleaned the house and went out. As soon as he left the door, his eyes sized up the surrounding posthouse attendants, wanting to see if there was anything wrong. But regrettably, these posthumans all behaved normally and none of them showed that there was something wrong. Subai thought for a moment and went back to his room. Then he picked up the books on the table and began to read them one by one. Even the Yin posthouse was the minion of the mastermind. It seemed that this net was extremely deep. He had to figure out the function of the Yin posthouse before making any plans. The content of this book was very concise and every point was just right. Posthouse Chief O must have written it very seriously in order to let him read it patiently. In less than the time for an incense stick to burn, he had finished reading all the contents. After that, Subai found a cage in the cabinet in the room. There was a carrier pigeon in the cage. This was the pigeon that contacted Yunlai Manor. It could lead directly to the government office, which was where Yun Zihai was. After all, the Yin posthouse belonged to the Yunlai Mansion. This was a necessary communication tool and was self-prepared. Subai thought for a moment and wrote down what had happened. Then he tied the pigeon to its leg and set it free. After doing all this, he did not stay idle. Instead, he directly stepped out of the door and followed the pigeon's flight path towards Yunlai Mansion. The pigeon flew very fast, but Subai's speed was not slow at all. He used the 4 steps to the fullest. After a while, the pigeon flew into the government office and Subai returned. When he climbed over the wall and entered, he happened to see Yun Zihai take the pigeon from his hand and remove the paper from the pigeon's leg. When Yun Zihai saw Subai, he was clearly stunned for a moment before he said, "Brother Su, weren't you the one who released the messenger pigeon?" Subai nodded. "I just wanted to see if this carrier pigeon was flying to you or somewhere else." As he spoke, he recounted his encounter. He had followed the messenger pigeon this time to see if it was going straight to Yunlai Mansion. If there were any abnormalities along the way or if it went somewhere else, then he would have new clues. Unfortunately, the other party seemed to be very cautious and did not make any mistakes in these details. There was no problem with the pigeon. Yun Zihai listened to Subai's story and frowned. "Brother Su, it seems that the other party doesn't only welcome me here but also doesn't welcome you. Indeed, he even used poison. This is good, otherwise this life will be too boring," Subai said. Chapter 197, Yunlai Manor is ours. 4. He didn't provoke anyone, he just planned to develop in this place for a while. He didn't expect things to really come to him. Could it be that every transmigrator had a special protagonist halo and was born to attract trouble? Subai was speechless. However, since the matter had found him, he had to fight back fiercely, pressing the other party to the ground and rubbing. If he wanted to focus on the progress bar, he first needed a stable environment, and a stable environment was created with his own hands. "Inform me immediately if you have the latest news. I must catch this person and let him see the evils of this world," Subai said. This was the first time Yun Zihai had seen Subai so hot-tempered. He quickly nodded, indicating that he would inform him in time. Subai did not stay any longer. he still had to rush back to the inn post house. He still had 3 progress bars to work on. After that he would make other plans, at least before Yunzihai found out. It would be extremely helpful to have an improvement. By the time Subai returned to the inn post house it was already close to night. After a long morning he finally had some free time. There were already a lot less post house people. A few post house people were still packing up the things on the stalls and preparing to leave. When they saw Subai they immediately walked over and greeted him. Regarding the matter of the new station chief, they were also the local tyrants in the surrounding area. They had long known that Subai's identity was self-evident since he was able to be welcomed into the house by Station Chief O this morning. As for why the boss didn't show up, they didn't care about that. As posthouse workers they were only doing business. Who would care about those things in the officialdom? Subai did not put on airs. In his opinion these people were his tools to make money. However, before these posthouse attendants left he still checked their things. When he didn't see the progress bar he lost interest and returned to his room. Hurry up. Subai sat on a recliner in the room swaying gently as he took out the purple cloud imperial technique. Although the furniture in this house was simple, it was really good to lie down. Needless to say the postmaster O was quite good at living. When lying on the recliner the comfort was suitable. Why did you provoke me for no reason? Subai looked at the slowly increasing progress bar and shook his head. Time slowly passed. In the blink of an eye it was already late at night. Subai lit the oil lamp on the table and continued to check the progress bar. This life was quite good. He also enjoyed this kind of life where he had to work hard. As long as there were no bad things he felt very comfortable. The room was dark and only the light from the oil lamp illuminated the room. As the recliner swayed it made creaking sounds in the room. The sound shook rhythmically. After shaking for a while Subai felt sleepy. The more dangerous the situation the more one had to maintain sufficient energy. Some things could not be rushed and had to be done step by step. Moreover this was a tier 5 cultivation method in his hand. There was no need to rush. Subai stretched his back and put the book back into the box under the bed before lying down on the bed. There was everything in the house including boxes and pots and pans which saved Subai a lot of trouble. As he thought about this his sleepiness grew stronger. However, just as Subai was about to fall asleep something terrible happened. A soft sound was heard. If it was in a lively time this sound might not be heard, but in the silent night it was clearly heard. It was a woman's voice. It sounded intermittently and disconnected from time to time. Moreover his voice was sometimes high and sometimes low as if he was singing. Subai narrowed his eyes and got up from the bed holding ghost head blade in his hand. When the forest is big there are birds everywhere. At least I can sleep for a while. I can sleep now. I can sleep tonight. I'm afraid I can't sleep. Although the voice was intermittent it did not completely stop. Subai came to the door and opened it looking at the night outside. Outside the door there was silence. The full moon hung in the sky and the silver light sprinkled down as if it had covered the earth with a layer of silver. It was very beautiful. The moment Subai opened the door the intermittent voice became clearer. Sometimes he would sing loudly and sometimes he would sing softly. If the strange environment was not taken into account this voice was quite pleasant to hear. However, in this endless night a voice appeared out of nowhere. No matter how pleasant the sound was it would still make one's hair stand on end. Subai closed his eyes and listened carefully for a while before opening his eyes again. When he opened his eyes the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He had already heard the content of the voice. Show. This was the singing style of an opera. Although there were no words it could be clearly distinguished just by the babbling sound. In the middle of the night disturbing my dreams. Subai smacked his lips and pulled out his ghost head blade. He closed his eyes and sensed for a while before chasing after the sound. You like to sing, right? I caught you and made you sing for me for a night. Under the night sky Subai had already disappeared into the distance with the 4 steps. The closer they walked to the source of the sound the clearer it became and the louder it became. When Subai followed the voice and walked to the end of the forest everything in front of him suddenly became clear. In front of them was a huge empty space. On the empty space a stage was built with broken wood. Chapter 198, Yulai Manor is ours. 5. On the stage stood a woman with a slim figure. She was wearing a costume and putting on makeup. Due to the heavy makeup her face could not be seen clearly, but from her slim figure this woman was not bad looking, a little worse than Lu Su. Subai thought to himself, in terms of figure there was currently no one who could compare to Lu Su. When Subai appeared the woman on the stage stopped singing and turned around to face Subai. At this moment Subai finally saw the makeup on the other party's face. In short, Subai was a bore. He was not as literary as a scholar, nor was he like some scholars who recited poems. Looking at the makeup on this woman's face he only had 2 words, not bad. He couldn't describe the so-called sinking fish and falling geese or the moon and flowers. It was already good enough that he didn't say anything. There was a good saying. Unfortunately he was uncultured and could only say F***ck and walk the world. However he still had to fight. Come sing for me. Subai saw that there was a single seat below the stage, so he walked up and sat on it. He looked at the woman on the stage with a teasing look in his eyes. At first he thought that there was something strange about the system, now it seemed that it was a real person. She came to find him in the middle of the night and even sang for him. If there was any secret she would know after taking a look. Young master, my show is very expensive. The woman placed her hand on her chin and gently brushed her cheek, making a shy and timid expression. 3. Subai suddenly said. This word was said inexplicably and the woman was very confused. 2. Another word popped out and the woman's expression became even more puzzled. 1. Subai sat up from his seat and used the 4 steps. He had already leaped high into the air and landed on the stage. Since you don't want to sing, then you can go to hell. Don't play these roundabout games with me. Ghost head blade swung out, bringing with it a biting cold wind. Under the moonlight it flickered with a chilling light, breaking second style. This move was obtained from the second nameless saber scripture and its power was even stronger when used. It had already reached the 3rd rank. The saber was like a shadow and the moon was like a plate. Under the moonlight Subai's eyes were as cold as ice. He was very annoyed. If you have something to say, just say it. He had been tormented for the whole day and was already very frustrated. She even gave him some confusion. He didn't say, give me death. If the woman in the costume was a good person, then please say it. If not, then it was fine to kill her. If he didn't say it directly and was killed again, then he couldn't blame anyone else. After all, Subai couldn't figure out if the other party was hiding some big move. This wasn't a game where the opponent would have a chance to use his ultimate move. The woman in the costume was obviously stunned, but she reacted quickly. She pulled out a fancy spear from the weapon rack beside her and blocked Ghost Head Blade in the middle. Clang! His voice was clear and resounding in the dark night. The spear and the Ghost Head Blade met. In just a moment the woman in the costume took 2 steps back, her chest heaving up and down, which was pleasing to the eye. Armor break. Nameless saber technique? No, this isn't the nameless saber technique. I've seen the nameless saber technique before. It's not like yours. Her voice was pleasant to the ear and at the same time it carried a hint of surprise. Do all dead people talk so much? Subai raised his Ghost Head Blade again and prepared to continue attacking. This woman could see through the nameless saber technique, but what she didn't know was that the 2 styles of breaking had already fused with other saber techniques and became different. It had the shadow of the nameless saber technique, but not all of them. It was even stronger. Seeing Subai's second slash, the woman hurriedly said, Lord Su, I'm a scout under the throne of the ascending abyss. A jade token appeared in the hands of the woman in the costume and was raised high by her. Ghost Head Blade stopped beside the blissful woman's neck. Subai took out another jade token from his waist. It was exactly the same as the one in the woman's hand. Are you crazy? He cursed as he withdrew Ghost Head Blade. The woman in the costume heaved a sigh of relief when she saw Subai put away his knife. Just as she was about to say something, she was suddenly scolded. She was completely stunned. If you have something to say, just say it. You're doing all these twists and turns. Just now if I had slashed down your head would have flown away. The woman in the costume was speechless. To be honest, she didn't want to either. This is my ability. I didn't dare to step into the Eam post house. This matter is really secretive, so I used a familiar method to trick Lord Su out. When she said this, the woman in the costume looked very ashamed. She really did not expect the other party to have such a bad temper. After all, she had never met him before. Then why didn't you tell me when you saw? Bai asked again. At the mention of this, the woman in the costume blushed slightly. This. Didn't they say that when experts meet they have to have some temperament? That's why I thought that only then can one have temperament. Subai was speechless. Lord Su, please don't blame me. I was only recently recruited into the army by His Highness, so there are many things I don't understand. The woman in the costume became more and more confused. Subai felt that the woman in the costume was very dumb. Let's get down to business. It couldn't be helped. If he met someone who was a little more stupid, it was better to be simple and direct. He was quite curious. According to the woman in the costume, King Yusheng had sent her to find him as if he did not want anyone to know. Then what was the matter? Chapter 199. The heart technique of sewing. More and more as everyone knew, King Shengyu was the emperor's younger brother and he held a high position in the court. It could be said that he was only below one person and above 10,000 people. Even if those first-class officials came, they would only be left in the dust. Not only the imperial court Great Chu, even the Jiang who feared King Shengyu, including Great Chu state in the barbarian land. These were all the results of the battle that King Shengyu had led thousands of troops in his early years. With such a person, what was there to be sneaky about? He had to send a female scout over to tell him secretly. Subai was a little curious. At the same time, he had a vague guess in his heart. He seemed to have guessed someone. If even King Shengyu could come here quietly, then there was only one person, Emperor of Great Chu. Thinking of this, Subai narrowed his eyes and continued to wait for the woman in the costume to speak. Just as the woman in the costume had said she was indeed a newbie, after a moment of panic she organized her words and told him everything that had happened. Your Highness returned to the capital and chatted with His Majesty before heading straight to the border. The woman in the costume straightened her long hem and said, before I left, the content of the conversation with His Majesty was related to you. I also specially came to inform you of this matter. Subai didn't say anything. He was waiting for the woman in the costume to continue. It was exactly as he had guessed. To be able to make King Shengyu secretly send someone over, it was indeed the great Chu Emperor. He just didn't know what else was going on. After learning about you, even His Majesty began to cherish talents. The two of them had a big fight in the royal study at that time, and after that His Highness left. The woman in costume said, however, before leaving His Highness made a bet with His Majesty about the matter of Yunlai Mansion.
Yunlai Mansion?
Subai raised his eyebrows and thought to himself that things were not that simple. So Yun Zihai and I came to Yunlai Manor because of His Majesty's plan. He couldn't help but recall what had happened before he was in the city. He, Yun Zihai and the others dealt with the 8th prince and then released King Shengyu. After King Shengyu returned to the capital, he quarreled with the emperor, and then Yun Zihai was in theft to Yunlai Manor. In other words, if Yun Zihai had not done this alone, he might have been assigned to another residence instead of the Yunlai residence. After coming to Yunlai Mansion, Subai also saw how deep the water here was. He had been assassinated twice as soon as he arrived. The matter inside was not something that ordinary people could settle. Based on the information he had obtained previously, it seemed that the emperor had arranged for the two of them to be here with a deeper meaning. The woman in the costume nodded. That's true, the waters in Yunnan Prefecture run deep. There are many complicated routes and many forces gathered here, so it's very difficult to deal with the things inside.
This answer confirms Subai's guess. What is the bet?
Subai asked. Let's bet on the governance of Yunlai Mansion. His Highness said that you can return Yunlai Manor to its former glory, but His Majesty thinks it's impossible, the woman in the costume replied. At this point, the woman in the costume looked at Subai curiously, her eyes darting around. Of course she was curious. Before she came, she had heard from His Highness that he valued Subai very much. It was unique. Although the woman in the costume was only a newbie and hadn't joined the army for long, this was the first time she had heard His Highness praise her. Therefore she was really curious about Subai. After seeing Subai today, she dispelled her curiosity. However, just because he had
given up, it didn't mean that he didn't have new curiosity. What are their stakes?
Subai placed his hand on his chin and rubbed it gently as he asked the question in his heart. Since it was a bet, there must be a stake. These two were the great Chu's first and second heads. The bet would definitely not be simple. If His Highness wins, His Majesty will not interfere in your affairs. You can do whatever you want. If His Highness loses, His Majesty will have to compete with His Highness for you, the woman in costume said. The wilderness fell silent. After the woman in the
costume finished speaking, Subai raised his head and said in a helpless tone, "Am I very handsome?"
The woman in the costume was stunned. She looked at Subai carefully and then nodded with certainty, yes.
The word was said with emphasis, and the answer was very firm. Why are they all looking for me? Why would the dignified emperor and His Highness make things difficult for a mere rank 8 like me?
Subai was speechless. To be honest, he really didn't want to get involved. He just wanted to focus on the progress bar. Why did these two treat him as a talent?
Was he a talent?
He really wasn't. He didn't know how to march and fight, nor did he know how to rule the country and pacify the world. He only knew how to kill. You might not know this, but at that time His Majesty asked an expert who was proficient in divination to calculate your matter. In the end, that expert said something directly. The woman in the costume said quietly, uncommon talent. Subai was speechless. The woman in the costume didn't see Subai's expression and continued. As for the rest, I don't know either. In any case, everyone thinks quite highly of you. It's said that the person who divined your fortune was also killed on the spot by His Majesty because he was afraid that news of you would leak out.
Subai fell into deep thought.
Chapter 200. The heart technique of getting stronger and stronger. Although he didn't know what was going on, if this matter was true, the emperor's actions were reasonable. If this news were to spread out, not only would Great Chu be the first to take action, but Great Yu and the Wildlands would also join in. Therefore, temporarily sealing off the news was a good thing for Great Chu. Then you're the only one who knows. Subai's gaze shifted to the woman in the costume. Even the diviner was dead. So only the woman in the costume knew about this. If something went wrong midway. The woman in the costume was shocked. She felt a boundless murderous aura enveloping her. Wait, I won't leak the secret. I definitely won't do such a thing. As soon as he finished speaking, Ghost Head Blade was already placed on the neck of the woman in the costume. It looked like he was about to take this beautiful head away.
I'm Chuyu, the daughter of King Shengyu. The woman in the costume quickly replied, tears almost coming out. Shengyu King has a daughter? Subai frowned.
Yes. I was born before His Highness passed away and I was raised by His Majesty.
The woman in the costume nodded her head vigorously, afraid that if she answered too late the knife would fall. Then why do you still call him Your Highness?
Subai expressed that he couldn't be trusted. Dad said that if I was in his army I could only call him that when I was doing business. I'm also doing business now. If you don't believe me, look at this.
Chuyu raised the jade token.
As she finished speaking, the jade tablet emitted a burst of light. Immediately after the image of King Shengyu appeared, Subai put down the knife and stared at the image. Subai, if you're seeing this, you should have already seen my daughter. She should have told you everything that happened. You're in charge of what to do next.
Chuyu held the jade token high and looked at Subai pitifully.
Subai was speechless. When he saw this image, he no longer had any thoughts. The first half of the sentence was fine, but what did the last sentence mean?
What did he mean by letting him take care of her? This made him a little dizzy. Wait a minute. Don't tell me you're going to stay by my side? Subai stared at Chuyu.
Chuyu nodded her head pitifully. My father said that he wanted me to experience the dangers of the martial world and temper my temper. That's why he sent me here. Besides, you're the only one who knows that I'm his daughter. After King Shengyu died, everyone said that King Shengyu had no successor. After all, it was related to the resurrection plan. This was also one of them. After that, when father returned to the capital, he didn't acknowledge me. He only acknowledged me in private and asked me to hide my identity. I thought it was for something else, but I didn't expect it to be for this.
Chuyu's face was filled with helplessness. She stirred her right hand, causing her hair that was draped over her chest to be messed up.
Then you can go back, I don't need it.
Subai sheathed his saber and turned to leave. What kind of joke was this? He wasn't a nanny, nor was he a teacher. Why should he help King Shengyu handle these family matters?
When Chuyu saw that Subai was about to leave, she took a few steps forward and blocked his path. She then spread her arms and raised them up. Wait, Dad said that I won't let you take care of him for free.
Even if you give me mountains of gold and silver, I won't agree.
Subai walked around Chuyu and said, he was not a good person who did charity. It was better not to get involved in such a situation. Father said that if I give you this, you will agree. Chuyu seemed to have thought of something. She rummaged in her pocket and took out a book, handing it to Subai. The book was still warm when Chuyu placed it on her bulging chest. Subai stopped and stared at the progress bar of the book, deep in thought. When he casually flipped to a page, he immediately understood what book it was. Nameless Saber Scripture. It was another Nameless Saber Scripture. This was the third book that could be classified as a first grade Nameless Saber Scripture. After collecting all 24 books, Subai sighed and quietly put the Nameless Saber Scripture into his clothes.
You can agree, but you have to listen to me.
Even if it was a mountain of gold and silver, he would not agree. However, the progress bar was different, and it was the progress bar of the Nameless Saber Scripture. After the Nameless Saber Scripture became the second form of breaking, it had already reached the level of Tier 3. If he comprehended it again, it was very likely to reach Tier 4. He really had no way to reject this thing. Smells good.
Don't worry, I'll definitely be very obedient.
Chuyu answered quickly. Then she seemed to have thought of something. She crossed her arms and covered her chest.
If you want to do that kind of thing, I can't.
The corner of Subai's mouth twitched. He didn't want to talk.